Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by two guests, not three. I'll have more to say about that in a minute, but let's go around the horn and say hello to everyone. Let's begin with Micah, my wife. Good to see you. How are you today, my dear? How are you doing,
I'm
beautiful?
doing very well. I'm excited for this upcoming weekend because we are spending the night at the Jefferson, which is like one of my favorite places in the world. They have like an excellent restaurant. It's become a little bit of a tradition for us to go there like once a year. And so I am super hyped about it because it's just like my favorite place in the whole world. I always joke that I feel like Eloise at the Plaza when we go there, and just having a one fancy day kind of per year to out of my like normal life. So I'm very giddy right now. I feel like the kid who is ready for like summer vacation, and it's tomorrow.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, we're excited. The Jefferson, we bring it up from time to time. People know, but it's the nicest hotel in Richmond. And we try to, like you said, try to go there once or twice. And we were just there actually for a luncheon, as they might call it there. Or if you're in Downton Abbey, for my mom for her retirement. And we stayed, let's see. So we stayed there after our wedding, and we stayed there when I asked you to marry me. And now this will be for your birthday. I asked you to marry me the day before your birthday in 2022 at the Jefferson. So it wouldn't be like the same day. That way you can it's like kind of annoying, right? If it's like, oh, now your birthday is the day we got engaged. It's like, no, you should have your birthday and the day we got engaged. So we are trying to get out there, and that will be a lot of fun to do that tomorrow. We're going to suit up and go to La Mer, which is like the in-house restaurant there. And it's way nicer than anything we would ever usually do. So that place is wonderful. And cool piece of like late 19th century post-Civil War destruction of Richmond building. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun to dress up and be fancy from time to time.
That's right, Hogue.
Yes.
And that's Rick Hogue, the voice of Rick Hogue, our legal analyst and friend of ours. Good to see you, my friend. Welcome back. So you're coming back from vacation.
I am. Yeah, we were gone. My family was gone for a couple of weeks. They had actually planned to take me on a cruise when I was in the ICU at the start of 2023. So I was obviously at that point in time not able to walk by myself. It was a goal set by my family to see if I could go on this cruise. And they didn't want to set it last year in 2023 because they didn't know how long rehab would be. So we set it for the summer of 2024. And I got to tell you, Disney World in January feels like rehab final exam. Like it's low light conditions. There's various inclines. There's people throwing their bodies and everything else in between you and where you're trying to get to. But we had a great time.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never gone on one before. I don't know that it would be for me. I feel I don't want to go anywhere. Let's be honest. Don't really want to go and visit anywhere anymore. So, well, I'm glad you're well. And thank you, Hope, because we just texted you or reached out to you yesterday from when we're recording to see if you can do the show, because we had some snafus with our scheduling, and I'm glad that you were able to make it. So I appreciate that. Your flexibility is wonderful in more ways than one, perhaps. So Dagon's missing. We'll speak to that. Dagon is, so as people know, like we started the show kind of together, and then he kind of started to kind of take it over. But the reality is that he's kind of in a bad way. He told me I can say whatever I want, so I'm not going to like, sugarcoat it or whatever. He's like kind of just in a bad way. He's working a lot. He's kind of just personally struggling. And so he's stepping away from all of the stuff we're doing for the time being. And he's obviously welcome to come back if and when he wants, but that will be ultimately up to him, because I think it's just more stuff on his plate that he just can't deal with right now. And we'll go through those moments or whatever, so that's fine. But just letting you guys know why he's absent and will be absent. There's really nothing more. There's no conspiracy behind it. It's really just a person that's overwhelmed, I think, with life. And I get it because I've been there. So we'll wish him the best, and hopefully he'll be back on the show sooner or later. And we were supposed to, so ironically, we were supposed to have Maddie on today as well. and Dagan's topic was going to be a political topic about guns, and Maddie doesn't want to do political topics. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to change topics. We'll just have Maddie go, because I want people to be able to talk about what they want to talk about. And then so he was out, and then this happened, Dagan kind of bowing out as well. But then we got Hogue in there in the middle. So nonetheless, this is the lineup we have. And
you're stuck with me, folks. That's the end of the story.
Well,
Sorry.
It's not even that. It's just that there's only three of us, I guess is what I'm saying. Because it would typically be four of us. Although I don't mind having three of us. I think in some sense, the conversation is a little more fluid with three as opposed to four. So I have no problem with this. So of course, for the uninitiated, Constellation is our conversational podcast. Topics widely range about everything, usually not games related, but they can be. And I'm going through here, Micah. So I know you've been excited about your topic, and so I want you to go first this week. And you can take it away.
All righty. Yeah, this is a really easy one. Break the ice for us today, gentlemen. I have gathered from Parade Magazine. You haven't heard that name in 50 years, have you?
No.
I have gathered from their illustrious website some would you rather questions. And I did this. I sourced them from this website partly because I know would you rather can get rather vulgar, and we're not going in that direction today. These are going to be light, fun. We're not going to make Rick say anything that he wouldn't want to say.
Right.
But we're going to start this off. All right. We're going to start this off nice and easy, gang. Would you rather die before or after your spouse? Nice and light.
Yeah.
Before. Yeah.
So you want to leave me, Colin? You want to leave me to deal with all your
selfish.
assets?
My mom used to always say that to me because when I was younger, I would always be like, I hope I die before anyone else dies that I care about. Like when I was a kid, I would say that. And she would be like, that's really selfish, to feel that way. And I'm like, yeah, I understand, but nonetheless. Yeah, that's how I would feel about this. it's
funny when I went down, right, and I woke up in the hospital, one of the feelings I had was that I was sad that I couldn't be there for my wife during this crisis, right? And of course I was there. I was just unconscious. But I think I would feel bad if I died first. And I don't know what the afterlife holds for us or what level of emotionality I have in that capacity, but I would want her to go first, except that I know how incapable I am of logistics and scheduling management and all the other things that she does every day. So I'm pretty sure I would want her to go first, but I think it might be better for everybody involved if I did.
Yeah, and I want to point out too, I made this list when I still had Maddie in the lineup. All right, I did not intend to hit Hogue with this question, but then I forgot about it, and then I was like, we're just rolling with the list that I wrote. This is a tricky one because on the selfish level, I say, oh, I'd want to die first. Do I want to manage dealing with Colin's estate and bank accounts and these various things? We recently had a kind of serious discussion of we both need to sort of make a list just of what accounts we have so that we're aware of what exists should one of us pass away, and it's like, yeah, you should know which bank accounts I even have so that you can contact the banks. Right. So you should know which credit cards I have because I'm on paperless statements for everything, right? Like I'm not getting these in the mail like grandma did. And she could just, tally up all grandpa's mail and be like, these are all his accounts because they're sending us letters every month, right? So we have had kind of a bit of a morbid discussion surrounding that. And the reality is that Colin's finances are way more complicated than mine. If I die, it's easy peasy, right? You transfer the car over. I have 2 bank accounts. Like this is fucking easy for Colin's side of things. For me, it's like Colin owns an entire business and everything, the house. It's just like, on a selfish level, I'd say, oh yeah, let me die first, please. Let me just get out of here and you can hire some sort of estate person to handle things, when you pass on. But of course, yeah, when I think about it in a more serious way, it's like, I guess, I'd want to be the one to take that mantle. I guess I wouldn't want Colin to have to be an old man and cooking for himself and all that. Like I would want to be the person who's taking care of him until his untimely demise, you know, and I don't want to be suspected of anything. I didn't do it. All right. I didn't do it. The creamed corn was at an appropriate temperature. The fact that it burned his esophagus, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
All right. He was frail. But so, yeah, when I think about it and like the selfish, like gut reaction is like, oh, let me die first. But when I think more seriously on it, I'm with you, Rick, of like, I think I'd want to be the survivor so that I could take care of things, you know?
Yeah, I just feel bad about how bad I'd do at it.
Yeah, if I die, you'll find I'll have to leave evidence of my secret Cayman bank account, the second family I have and have been supporting for 20 years in Oregon, my other wife, bunch of other things that are happening that are crazy. No, it's true, man, because well, Micah knows because we've been talking about it obviously behind the scenes. But my dad has like been very persnickety about like getting his shit in order. And a few years ago, he sat the 4 siblings down, and his wife did the same with her 2 daughters, and was basically just like, listen, like they own a house in the Hamptons on Long Island, like a 7-figure, really beautiful house, and on like a lake, like a small lake, a pond, I guess you would say, and they're like, all right, so each of you owns like a piece of this when we go, and here's how it all works. And what's funny is Long Island is, I was telling Micah this, that Long Island is so fucking annoying with the like what you're doing to the land, and is it sustainable, and like all of these rules and historical society rules and all this kind of shit, that they're constantly having to like do things to kind of stay above board with that. And so we recently had to rework, or my dad had to rework all the documents, and we had to like dig and had to go get things notarized and signed. It's quite annoying to like have all of these things in order. And it is morbid to like hear your own father say, yeah, like, I guess I'm going to die at some point, and here's what's going to happen. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of, I've said it over and over again. It's almost tempting fate, is like, I've somehow dodged like important people dying around me for many, many years, since my grandparents in the 90s, really, so it's scary to know that it's inevitably going to happen to one of us, either me or someone else in the family, but then it's going to start probably cascading as all these people have lived for so long. And there's all this complication behind the scenes, but it won't be so complicated, Micah. I mean, in reality, we have, I have a financial advisor who deals with a bunch of stuff, so he'll clue you in on all the retirement stuff. We basically own the house outright. At the end of the year, we will. So that will be fine.
Congrats to that. That's awesome.
Thank you. I've just been really heavily like, I put half down when I bought it, but I'm just trying to like just eliminate the mortgage.
Oh, I hear you. I hate debt.
Yeah, me too. And my financial advisor's always like, you don't like, just give me the money and like, we'll invest. And I'm like, shut up.
Yes, leverage.
What don't you understand, Alex, about what I'm trying to say? Like I'm so paranoid about losing my job or not having income anymore that I basically just save as much money as humanly possible and pay all of my debts off. It's even why I've said it before. It's even why I got solar panels. So it's like, we'll just eliminate as much as humanly possible, so that when the other shoe inevitably drops, I hopefully won't have a mortgage to pay. So yeah, so things, and then the bank accounts and stuff. So we'll be fine. You'll be fine. It's important to note, like, you're a woman, so you're actuarially, right? The actuary chart. How would you say that? Right? Actuarially.
I've never heard this word before.
Actuary.
I was like, what are you stuck on?
Like
so actuaries like project how long you're going to live, right?
Right.
So he's trying to use the adjectival form.
Actuarially, right? You are liable to live longer than me, and you're 10 years younger than me.
I'm banking on the lead poisoning.
Like,
I got the lead poisoning. I got the dent in the back of my head that we don't know what that's for or what it could possibly be doing. I'd love to think that if you took a plunger and popped that dent out of the back of my head, that I'd be a completely different person. Like, wouldn't that be fun? Like we just go to a mechanic with a little fix-a-dent thing and we just see what happens if you pop that out.
Well, your brain would have had more volume to fill in your skull, and you would have been just a little smarter and a little more normal, probably.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, it's which part of the brain is it pressing on? Is it pressing on the part of the brain that makes you more social? Is that why I'm such a recluse? Is it pressing on the part of the brain that would make me, like, oh, like she's a murderer? Maybe it's suppressing that. Maybe it's tamping that down. I want to talk to a doctor someday without sounding crazy. Be like, which part of my brain is this dent pressing on? and maybe they can answer it. All right, gentlemen. Well, let's try a different one.
Sure.
Would you rather be gassy on a first date or at your wedding? Which one sounds worse?
Sounds worse. I think it would be worse to be gassy on your first date.
See, yeah, we got two opposing answers here. Colin, let's hear your reasoning.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, because
no, it was
like by the time you're wet.
So we said the same thing.
Oh, you said the same thing. Okay.
I got it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think you'll know me by then, and it will be funny. Right?
Yeah.
It's like Hogue was at our wedding. It's like when I was at our wedding and I couldn't stop sweating when we were outside, right?
It was really hot.
Like it was really hot. It was like 87 degrees in October. Like just to reiterate, we went over this when we talked about the wedding, but just to reiterate, we were so amped to get married in late October because I am a notorious overheater after I started taking Lexapro and it's destroyed like my chemistry in my body. So everything, like once I start sweating, it's fucking crazy. The other day I was mowing the lawn. It was 100 degrees out. So there's that as well. But I was mowing the lawn and I came inside and I was wearing like I had these like gray shorts and it was just like sweat all the way through them. I'm like, oh, that must have been very pleasant for everyone outside to see like the fucking bikini line of my butthole on my of sweat or whatever. But so at the wedding, that was horrible because it ended up being the hottest day on record ever that day, October 28th in our area. And I was like, you motherfuckers. You know, because I was amped. I was like, we're free and clear, dude. No problems. And if it's rainy or shitty, we'll just do it inside, whatever the case might be. And I'm there dabbing myself like a fucking Southern dandy the entire time. It was horrible, you know? But that was funny because we know each other. As opposed to if that happened when we first met, that would have been like, oh, Jesus Christ. You know? Put on some Toms from Maine, buddy.
I do think first impressions are important. And I do think I would rather have it at the wedding because, as you say, at that point, you're pretty committed, either from the engagement or the planning of the wedding itself. So you know what? People have different reactions to that level of stress. It's okay.
Can I make an admission real quick?
Yeah.
Micah knows this because I told her. But I always talk about how, like, you know, you fart and I have a non-0% chance that I'm going to shit myself. At the wedding, I let out a fart and it was going to be like, I just caught it like before the wedding and it could have been catastrophic is all I'm saying. But I God was smiling upon me that day and I caught it. And it was very, very scary indeed. You know, that would have been a little bit more ruinous than the sweating, I think. So,
no, that would have been terrible if you pooped your suit before the wedding.
Mean,
we would have had to just go home, get your alternate suit. It would have been complete disaster.
I would have been so mad.
No, this question reminds me of an Xbox 360 arcade game some of you might be familiar with called Try Not to Fart, which I played on my YouTube channel back in the day. It's a fantastic little game by Silver Dollar Games, I believe. And the whole game is that this man has a chronic farting problem. And you have to help him from first date to the birth of his child through all his life events. You're trying to help him hold in his farts or his wife will leave him. And it is like, it's a really funny game in the first place. But it is true of like, yeah, this poor woman has put up with his farts for so long. That's like, the moment where like their baby's born, you have to like not fart through that. And then you play as the baby and the baby has the gas problem and like you have to deal with that. But it's like, yeah, first date. I mean, especially as a woman, we're not even supposed to fart. I mean, that would be catastrophic, I feel, if you were like really lighting them off on a first date. But here's the thing. It's like, are they silent? Are they smelly? You can blame it on somebody else so long as there's no sound, right? So long as you can't echolocate where that came from, you know, you can be like, oh my God, that guy over there stinks, you know, like you point at somebody else. But yeah, wedding, as long as it's not on video, nobody's gonna hear the farts. Right. You know, you'll forget all about it. So I'm with you guys.
Lapel mic on your butthole if you want. You know?
That's the current fan theory surrounding Colin's farts on the shows, is that perhaps he has a microphone taped to his chair to catch them because there's just no way they're so raucous. The audience doesn't understand. All right, Colin farted the other day. He was up in his office. I was downstairs in the living room. I heard it from there. And I heard it easily from there. It wasn't like, what was that? It's like, I heard it. I heard it.
We were saying this on Sacred that just yesterday, which was, it's like, I grew up in an environment where farting was funny. And like, we thought it was funny. Like my dad thought it was funny. Everyone thought it was funny. And so, and you'd laugh and you'd laugh and you'd laugh. And then as you get older, you realize like, oh no, not everyone finds this funny at all. You know, actually just like I just fart and burp all the time. I just can't stop, you know? So.
I think farting is funny. You know, there's of course limits, right? We had an office farter at my old job. It got to the point where a manager had to speak to him about it, and which was he said it was one of the most awkward conversations he ever had in his life, especially because the guy denied it. And it was like, bro, we've been hearing these farts, man. Like, I'm in the cubicle next to you. We hear it. Like, we see it. He would lift up a leg to fart. Like, it was like, dude, we see you. We hear you. It's like, you can't deny this. And then, so, you know, our boss talks to him and we weren't supposed to know about it. But the boss let us know because we were the ones who complained, you know? And so he told us, I did speak to him about it. And then like the next day, the dude tried to blame it on his space heater. And so he was like, oh, I think the space heater is what's making the bad smell. And it was never about the smell. It was the noise. It was the noise, not the smell. So then every time he used a space heater, he'd announce it. He'd be like, I'm turning on my space heater in case you smell anything. And like, it was just, oh my God, it was terrible. It was terrible. Office life is for the fucking birds. All right. But let's try another one of these on. Would you rather swim in a pool full of Nutella or a pool full of maple syrup? Again, these are from Parade Magazine. I did not make these up. But Nutella or maple syrup, which would you rather swim in?
I feel like with Nutella, you're going to drown. You know? Seriously. First of all, Nutella
is very
sucks.
thick.
Second of all, you're going to drown because it's so thick.
Yeah.
You go, and the volume is so high and there's going to be some sort of like, you know, pressure on you. You're not going to be able to get back up.
Well, let's say then that it's a pool. It's only like 4 feet deep. Okay. Let's say that you're in it. Like you're something you could soak in. Which would you rather be in? Because no, we're not in a dangerous situation. It's not like which one am I going to die in? It's which one would you rather be surrounded by?
Nutella.
Okay.
I think Nutella would wash off easier. Do you think that same thing, Rick?
I do. I was actually just thinking of, you know, when you're at the restaurant and they give you the well-used maple syrup bottle just to use on your pancakes. And you swear you didn't touch any maple syrup directly, but for some reason your hands are sticky for 3 hours.
Right.
I would rather be in Nutella.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Because syrup really is persnickety in that way. Like it just finds its way in. We just went to the Cracker Barrel a couple days ago and I got the French toast with the chicken and all that. And it was really good. And I like their little they give you your own little bottle that you open. Yes. Seems a little unnecessary. I like the ones, I know what you're talking about because there's 2 different ways that like, you know, a greasy spoon will present to you syrup. It's either in like some literal log cabin bottle that's been like refilled 17 times and it like the label's like torn off and it's fucking never been wiped down, or little classier is you get those little glass, like they almost look like alchemy things from like the Middle Ages and the little metal thing comes off and you pour it on. That's a little fancier and a little nicer, but that's usually the 2 ways that you present it. I was surprised Cracker Barrel being a lower class establishment, let's say in some sense. I mean, that they would take they would give you the personalized maple bottle. Like you would think that would be something that would happen at like a nice hotel or something. Yeah. You know, it's like when you get the glass bottles of Coke, you know, you're at a nice place. Like I'm not talking about Mexican Coke. I'm talking about the squat little glass bottles you get at like hotel conferences. Like, you know, you're in a nice spot when you get that bottle of Coke that's like 2.5 ounces, you know? So
yeah,
anyway, I'm going on a rant.
No, but it is at Cracker Barrel. It is unexpected that you would get I love Cracker Barrel. It's my favorite restaurant. Okay. But you get your silverware in like the little paper bag. Okay. They just bring you a stack of paper napkins type deal and just leave them on the table. Like it's not the classiest joint in the world. And so it is kind of like, I'm surprised that you're giving me my own little individual bottle of syrup. And then you're like, well, okay, which way is it more expensive? Is it more expensive if I'm wasting a bunch of syrup or if you just give me one little bottle and I'm using only that? Because like asking for more, I don't know, how long is that going to take the waitress to get back to you? It's not the speediest place in the world. So if I had to choose which one of these to swim in, here's the thing. I love maple syrup. I love it so much. but I do think it would be horrendous to have to wash off later. So I'm going to go with Nutella. I think that's the right choice. It would also just be delicious. You just kind of open your mouth while you're swimming through it. That'd be great. So yeah, I'm going with Nutella on that one.
I do like Nutella.
Yeah.
But I think for stickiness is why I would choose that particular pool of food.
Clarification needed, though. Yeah. When you talk about syrup, are you talking about, like manufactured, what I would call good syrup? Like Log Cabin, Aunt Jemima, whatever kind of thing? Or I don't know if I'm allowed to say her name anymore. Or are you talking about like the shitty Vermont, Ontario, it's like water, basically. Makes you want to, because that would be basically like swimming in a dirty pool at that point. And that wouldn't really be so bad at that. But I just wanted to know what kind of syrup you're thinking about, because like the real viscous fake syrup is where it's at, but that's a different scene when you're swimming in that, as opposed to, I wouldn't want to eat the Vermont maple syrup because it sucks. I want to underline that. Sucks. I'll never forget the first time I went to Vermont and had that maple syrup, and it was like just coming out of there like water, like it's a fucking bottle of water. What is this? Anyway, I'm going on a rant again. I'm sorry.
It's it's just I do love real maple syrup.
I know,
but it's because I grew up in an area that had maple sugar houses as well. Like Massachusetts, obviously not known for its maple syrup, but we do maple sugaring there. You'll see all the trees with the buckets on them, the right time of year. So I did grow up, like real maple syrup was a treat. It wasn't something we could afford, really. If I'm answering this question, though, I'm posing it as fake maple syrup because that's what most people have in their pantries. I'm posing it as like, yeah, what would the average person think of when you say maple syrup? And I'm thinking it's going to be the really thick kind.
Mm.
Yeah, the one at the supermarket, right? They said Nutella. Right. They didn't say hazelnut spread or whatever.
Right.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, let's try this one. Would you rather buy all used underwear or all used toothbrushes?
Underwear.
Wait, I need a definition. What does all used mean?
Okay. So like you're only allowed to buy used underwear or you're only allowed to buy used toothbrushes like for the rest of your days.
Okay, so the volume of underwear is entirely used, but not all used in some fashion that I wasn't contemplating. All right.
Interesting. Yeah, we're like in a spelling bee where we have to ask for like clarifications and like using it.
Right.
Could you use that in a sentence, please?
Yeah. It's got to be the underwear, right?
I think so, because is buying used underwear a little bit of a mind over matter thing? Yeah, but they do it. You go to Goodwill or Salvation Army, you will find used underwear. People do buy it. A used toothbrush seems just crazy.
I feel like I could clean a toothbrush. I feel like I could use, a retainer cleaner or whatever and get a toothbrush to somewhere where I was psychologically happy with it. I don't think I would be psychologically happy knowing that there were a lot of other folks in my underwear.
Interesting. Because I'm on the opposite end where I'm like, you can bleach the shit out of that stuff. Like you could do whatever it is you want to it. And you could do the same thing to the toothbrush. You really could get them both like sterile easily. But I have an easier time getting over the used underwear for some reason.
Yeah, I feel like underwear is easier for me. I also, like, for example, I have a friend who exclusively wears used underwear, and it's always thongs, which just makes it worse, in my opinion.
What does this mean? What are you talking about?
She only buys her underwears at Salvation Army.
Oh, okay.
And only thongs. They're never in a package. It's just like they're used. And it's just, well, I'm not judging it, okay? But it's just like, she's cool with it. And she always has been cool with it. And so I guess that's where my mind first went. It was like, well, if she's okay with it, it seems like Colin said, it seems easier to me to throw it in the wash on hot with my Lysol laundry sanitizer than figuring out how to sanitize a toothbrush in a way that then I wouldn't be a hypochondriac thinking, am I swallowing bleach, type deal. Like that's where the second end of it is, can I rinse the toothbrush thoroughly enough that I'm going to be convinced it doesn't still taste like bleach and I'm accidentally eating bleach and then I'm going to be panicking? Or the underwear. I mean, you just stop thinking about it after a while. I think you wash them enough times, all right, and then they're your underwear. I feel like that's where my mind goes. I think I'd take the underwear over the toothbrush.
Have you ever used another person's toothbrush before?
I don't think so.
Because you guys are married. You've never used each other's toothbrushes?
No. Even like within family, that seems horrendous. That seems terrible.
Yeah, it's bad. I've done it with one person, and it's not even a person I was like very close to. I was a girl I was randomly dating like many years ago. And I was just happy a pretty girl wanted to talk to me. So I was like, oh yeah. She's like, yeah, would you use my toothbrush? I'm like, oh, okay. You
offered.
And did that a few times, but I was like, but in hindsight, I'm like, no, I don't want to. You'll do anything at some point when you're a young man, So I'm a little older and more wise now. Wiser. More wise is not the proper English. So
that's the thing. I am a bit of a germaphobe. I don't even really like sharing drinks with people ever.
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal.
It's like, will I? Of course. If you ask for a sip of my water, you're welcome to have it. But I might stop taking sips until I can get another glass of water. All right. Like, I just don't, or like, I have to be desperate to be like, Colin, can I have a sip from your water bottle? And it's like, I just don't like it. It's always been a thing with me, but it hasn't always been a thing. My sister and I used to swap gum when we were kids. So I don't know when this started. I used to be very cool with that, I guess.
That's so gross. That's like unimaginably gross.
I don't know. We would get different packs of flavors. Okay. Like she'd choose one flavor. I'd choose a different one. And then we'd be like, want to switch? And we just swap gum. It was gross, but I don't know. At the time it seemed perfectly fine. Just ABC gum. Everyone's cool with it. Well, I wouldn't have done that just with some random classmate, though. But I don't know. Kids are gross.
But yeah, I've always been averse to that too. I mean, you do what you have to do. Like we share water bottles in hockey, but you're squirting it into your mouth. Like you'd always have one weird kid on your team that did put his mouth on it. And everyone would be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you drinking out of the water bottle like that?" And I was the goalie, so I had my own water bottle anyway on top of the net, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Well, you had to throw the water at you with the mask on, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, it's like, yeah, I would just lift my mask up to like, so it would sit on top of my head, squirt it in or whatever, get a little bit on your face. I would do whatever I saw the goalies in the NHL do. Yeah, everything I ever did as a hockey player was copying some other hockey player. So, and like what I thought I was supposed to be doing. But it's weird because I know it's like something Mike and I we're married. Obviously, we've talked about this in the past. Is like I'm not into like hardcore Frenching, making at like sucking each other's faces off for the same reason. I love kissing, passionately kissing. It's great, but like the whole like you see some of these people kissing, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? It's so gross when you really think about it. I'm like, I don't want to do that with anyone. Like I'm like inside your mouth, like my whole mouth. And my tongue and like it's like, I don't know. It's a little questionable, in my opinion. I know some people like that out there, but it's for the same reasons. It's not an affront to anyone. It's an affront to everyone. I don't want to share a drink with anyone. I don't want to French deeply fucking down your throat really because it's inappropriate. You think cavemen were kissing like that?
I don't know.
I really can't speak to cavemen kissing.
You think Russian serfs in 1400 were fucking down each other's throats like that?
Oh, well, what do you think that we've talked about what would medieval sex smell like? And, just the idea of like, you're waiting for your yearly bath so that this is tolerable for once, no, I think a lot of that is just like leave on your clothes, kind of try to keep the stink in and don't look at me. But that's my impression of what medieval times were like. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't care. If everybody stinks, can you smell it anymore?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You become nose blind to it, I assume, at some point, to yourself, to others. By the way, I just have to get this out because we were talking about farting earlier, and I was thinking about this, but then I didn't get a chance to say it, is that I have this one specific memory of being at IGN like early on, and we were in like we had like, it's cubicles, and our cubicles all kind of faced each other. So I was like in that middle space and I farted, but I always fart, but no one would hear it. It was like, when you let it go, you're just like, I'm just going to let this go. And it was so bad. Like it smelled so bad that I literally was like, I'm sorry. Like I stood up and like let everyone know, I'm like around me. I'm like, I let that one sneak out. I didn't know it was going to be potentially one of the worst things that you've ever smelled in your life. So I'm just taking credit for it now. Not credit. I'm taking the blame. Blame me. It's me. And I'm sorry about that, and I always remember that because you got to be careful out there. I'm a better calibrator of the fart now than I used to be. If it's feeling
I would have blamed
hot
it on someone else
when it's coming out, if it's got that hot feel, it's gonna be bad. But sometimes your internal temperature, you can't gauge it properly. Anyway, I don't mean to go backwards.
No, you're fine. I would have blamed that fart on someone else. I would have blamed it on the break room, which always smelled at my old job. There's always a stench coming out of the break room. I would have been like, man, it's wafted in here today. There's no way I would have owned up to that.
That's always the people microwaving their fish from the night before.
Right.
Oh my God. I mean, the fish, the strange soups. There was one guy who always brought frozen dinners that would not only would they take 15 minutes to microwave. Thank you for taking the microwave for 15 minutes. Really nice of you. But they would smell. They would smell so bad. I don't know what he was buying. I don't know what type of frozen meals they were. But the stench, he'd open up the microwave and it would just fill up the place. And it was just like, come on, man. But, oh yeah, fish, weird soup. It was just, yeah, I started going out to lunch more the longer I worked there, only because the break room would smell so bad. It's like, who wants to be in here for this?
I just remember Craig Harris, who was the IGN Nintendo like handheld guy for many, many, many years. He works at Apple now. He heated up shark in the microwave. And it smelled in there for like weeks. We also had a sales guy at IGN named Ryan who would just sleep in the break room every day. Like we had all these couches and TVs, and he'd just be there sleeping half the day for years.
I want to know what the last stand media break room smells like.
Well, I'm sorry. What'd you say, Hook?
I want to know what the last stand media break room smells like.
Oh man.
I mean, it's usually whatever we had for dinner the night before is what I'm heating up for lunch the next day. So it could be anything. It could be tofu. It could be ham. It could be seafood. But thankfully, no one else lives here. So no one else is bothered by it.
We have 2 Boston Terriers and they fart about 7,000 times a day each.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Fucking disgusting. And then they'll lick each other's faces and each other's mouths and each other's ears. It's like, you guys are so gross. Like, what is wrong with you guys?
Oh, they're horrendous.
All right, back to you, Micah.
All right, yeah. Let's try another one. Okay. Would you rather have 1 wish granted today or 10 wishes granted 20 years from now?
Oh, I'll take a wish today.
See, I think I'm going to take the wish today because there's no guarantees 20 years from now. There's no guarantees I'm going to be here. There's no guarantees what my life's going to look like by then. It's like, I think I would take the 1 guaranteed wish versus waiting, 20 years and that whole time thinking, I'm just waiting to get to those wishes, like thinking of all the things you could have wished for along the way.
It does feel like there would be like a Twilight Zone morality lesson about you put your life on hold for 20 years to wait for the wishes. So I do think those are exactly the right reasons. I am, newly perspectivized on my mortality, and I don't want to try to bet that 20 years I'll be fine. But outside of that, I think when you have conversations with like financial planners or trust and estates, like we were talking about earlier, one of the things that you have as a conversation is, yes, it's good to save. Yes, it's good to be responsible, but also you want to make sure that you are spending your resources, your money, whatever it is that you have in a reasonable way now and not just saving it for when you'll be comfortable later. And sometimes that's, giving gifts to your kids or your family members or whatever it looks like for your particular financial situation. So I do think the same way. I would want to wish now when I can conceptualize what I could most benefit from and how I could use that to better my family's position, then hopefully in 20 years' time, not need it as much as I could have now. So that's my thought process.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like you were saying, it kind of gets into the whole Social Security thing in some sense. Like, do you take early, and get more guaranteed money, or wait and get more later? It's too risky. I would take it now too, and make a really good wish. Yeah,
we don't need to lawyer this. Amazing. We don't need to lawyer this. We don't need 100 wishes. We don't need to try to get around this. But I think just one good wish could set your life in a really good place.
Definitely. I would argue in some sense, like 20 wishes is almost excessive. Like, what would you, 20 wishes?
10 wishes.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10 wishes. That's still a lot of wishes, though.
That's still a lot of wishes.
I mean, when you're getting to like the fifth, the sixth wish, you must have like satiated, if you're smart. Like, you don't even need, maybe you can give them away to other people. But yeah, you can make one good wish. Like, give me $500 million. I wish for $500 million. Okay?
We don't know how monkey paw this particular wish granting mechanism is. But yeah, absolutely. You should be able to get to a place where you're pretty happy with very few wishes.
I'm not crazy about the existence of billionaires, so I'll wish for $999,999,999.
From a spiritual perspective, aren't you just wishing for $1 billion without saying it?
Right. That's exactly right. But no one has to. But how active is the deity that's watching this? Or do they know? Is it a Calvinist god?
But how much money do you already have? Because then you'll have. It's like, well, wait a minute. You got to add up. Like, if you're a penny over in the bank, then you're going to be a billionaire, and then it's all moved.
Right.
See, I just watched too many Twilight Zones. My concern is you ask for that much money, and it's delivered to you by a lawyer that's explaining that your entire family is dead, and this is what they've left you.
Right. Totally. I'm a big Twilight Zone fan too, and I totally agree that like it would be too good to be true. Something bad would have to happen.
Yeah, what was that movie from the 2000s? It was called like The Button or something. The whole point being that like The Box. I saw it in theaters, and the whole point being that, yeah, you're going to push this button to get something, and someone somewhere random will die. And it's like, do you push it or not? And of course, it's like, yeah, well, if you push the button, you don't know who's going to die. You don't push the button, that box is going to go to somebody else. You could be the one that they push the button and you die. It's endless dilemma. I would take the wish now. I'm very pure of heart, though. There's one thing in this world, Colin, I've always wanted. Just one. I've always wanted to be able to whistle. So I probably would take the wish, and I'd either wish for that or I'd wish for $1 million. But I feel like either way, I'd be happy. I already got the propeller hat. Your mom gave me that.
This goes back to Micah annoying the shit out of me about what she would do with 3 wishes, and they're like the worst wishes you could possibly imagine. Like, you couldn't even construct worse wishes than what she's like.
I wanted a propeller hat, a corn dog, and I wanted to know how to whistle. Or I would switch the corn dog for $1 million because Colin was getting all up in arms about it. So I said, okay, instead of a corn dog, $1 million. You know, I'm giving you that wish, basically. We have agreed that if I ever found a genie, he gets one wish. All right, I won't use all the wishes. Colin gets a wish, but
yeah, I made her do that because like your wishes are so bad that I know you're trying to be funny, but someone needs to watch out for you because you're a lunatic. If some genie came out of it and was earnestly like, we'll give you 3 things, like whatever you want, and you said a corn dog and a propeller hat, well, I told you, I'm like, that's divorceable in my opinion. Like we could have generational power and wealth, right? And so someone's got to step in and be like, all right, you can have your stupid fucking corn dog, but like we'll get the money at least, you know, or something like that. Ridiculous. I'd like to think that you're just I know you're kidding, but I'd like to think that if you were really presented with that you would not make those choices. So if I really had 3 wishes, whistling is going to be one of them. I have been ridiculed my entire life for not being able to whistle. All right. You don't understand the emotional damage that's been done to me. Wet your lips and blow through them.
I can't do it. I've tried. Don't mock me. You stop that right now. No, I've tried my whole life to whistle. I can't do it though. And so no, I'd wish for that. I'd spend 1 wish. If I got 3 wishes, I'm spending one of them on something I've always wanted. All right, which would be to whistle. Because I'm not going to, monkey's paw situation, I'm not going to wish to be taller, because what if he made me like a freak, you know? Like, you got to be careful. But I don't see any downsides to knowing how to whistle. Unless he made me whistle like all the time. Like I
do like the whistle wish as a check on whether you're dealing with an evil genie. It seems hard to imagine a Twilight Zone whistle wish going wrong. So I do like it for kind of safety insurance purposes at the top, but that's a game that I used to play, right? Because I am a big fan of Twilight Zone. I am a lawyer at this point in my life, and trying to figure out how could you word this if you've got an evil wish granter. how could you word it to be as less negative as possible, as least harmful to you as you can imagine? And one of the things you learn as a contract attorney is that basically you can't. Basically everything that you write, every promise that you make, everything that you describe can be read in bad faith, can go around the bend and make things worse for you. That's why in the world of law, we have an implied duty of good faith and fair dealing when you enter into a contract, because words can only get you so far. But I do like to play that game of, what if the wisher had said this instead? And then would that have worked? And what could the genie do in that scenario? But I'm weird.
By the way, how cool is Rod Serling? Just the coolest.
Pretty darn cool.
Yeah, just the cool. I love the whole, no one else really does it. Like the whole, well, I guess it comes kind of from Hitchcock, but like the walking on the set, like being there and like telling the story or whatever. And like, I just love that kind of, I love him. I was so jealous of him when I was a kid. I was like, what a talent. Like what an amazing, Hogue, what's your favorite episode of Twilight Zone?
The one that pops into my head the most that was really impactful for me as a kid is Eye of the Beholder, which is where the woman has the bandages around her head and is hoping and asking the doctors if they had fixed her, and they don't know until you get to the very end. And all of the doctors and everybody in the society is, let's say, messed up. They have makeup on, right? It's the 50s and 60s. But she's gorgeous, and they're trying to tell her how they're sorry they couldn't fix her ugliness. I really like that one. I really like the concept of perspective mattering that much.
Yeah, we watched that episode it must have been one of the first ones I actually ever saw, because in high school, it was like in some writing class or something, we watched it about subversion, I guess, or whatever. I love that episode too. I always think about various ones. One that sticks in my mind all the time, although it's not a beloved one, is the toy, like where all the toys are in the bin. That one,
which is a version of No Exit, right? I mean, like they did some really cool stuff with Twilight Zones.
That episode really disturbed me a lot, and so that one always sticks out to me. I also love the one where the astronauts are like fighting, and they never left Earth or whatever. Like they think they've like launched, and like they crash land and then like turn on each other to like survive, but then they've just never actually left. I love that show so much. I have a great my friend bought it for me years ago, like a cool compendium with like, it's like a guide you would read as you watch them. And I think they're all on, if people are interested in Twilight Zone, it's not for everyone, but I love it. I think it's wonderful. It's on Netflix, or it was for many years, like all of it. It's got to be somewhere for you to watch.
I believe it's on Paramount Plus right now, but
that would make sense. Yeah.
All of the services are everywhere. So
yeah, it's CBS, I guess. So that would make some sense.
I love the Twilight Zone.
Do you like Black Mirror as well?
I think Black Mirror gets a little arch for me, gets a little heavy-handed in whatever it's trying to say. But I do like the early seasons of Black Mirror, not as much as Twilight Zone, but I like moral comeuppances and those kinds of stories and short stories in anthologies. So
yeah, I love them. I love the first seasons too. The movie was pretty cool, but that season with like Miley Cyrus and everything, I was like, this season sucks. Not nearly as good as the old ones. They're coming back though, I think in 2025, right? So hopefully we'll see cool new ones. I showed Micah, because I've showed Black Mirror to several people in my life over time, and everyone loves it that I've showed it to. So I assumed Micah would love it too. And so I was like, well, watch them in order. So, because I have favorite ones.
You started with the pig
one, right?
That's a tough one to start with.
And she just didn't like it. And I'm like, oh my God, like if I knew you were just going to watch one, I would have showed you a different one. Because I actually like the pig one, but I think it's probably in the middle in terms of quality of the episodes. I would have showed her like White Christmas or White Bear, or one of those like iconic episodes. My favorite one is actually Metalhead, which is the black and white one, which I think, and Hogue, you'll appreciate this, is the one that I think is most like Twilight Zone. Not only for its black and white, but how quick it is. And I think I interpreted it as being a spoof on Twilight Zone, like literally. But for people that don't know, Metalhead is one of the episodes, and I think I told you this, Micah, where there's like it's like you don't learn anything about what happened, but it's like the world is in some sort of dystopian post-apocalypse or whatever. and people are hiding and trying to get around, and the only things that are hunting them are these like small metal dogs that are fucking nuts. Like, will stop at nothing once they track you to like kill you. And it is hard. It's a horrifying episode. I love it. Love it. So good. So scary. You know?
Well, yeah, that was, because I'll say that episode we did watch is an excellent episode of television, but I don't enjoy being disturbed on that level. Like, I enjoy scary things, but I don't really like things that haunt you. And I just remember, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, I don't need this. All right. I don't need this in my life. I don't need to feel so disturbed by the television I have watched. Like, it was too much. I was like, I can't watch 100 of these. That's for sure. Like, it was a great episode of television, very well acted, very well written. But I was like, people watch this for fun. All right. Like, I want to put on, I Think You Should Leave.
Yeah.
I'm trying to relax.
The level of anxiety that Black Mirror gives me, and I mean this honestly, is unlike anything that I've ever watched, and I like it. Like,
yeah.
I like the way it makes me feel. The episode I think of is the one with well, I don't want to spoil it. I guess you would know, Hogue, though. It's like where the guys like rob the bank together and do all that shit, and you find out like who the kid really is at the end, and like that episode was so disturbing at the end that I was like, holy fuck. It, like, you like sit there when it's over and be like, that's what it's about. It's so fucked, you know? And I love that shit, man. Because I want things to make me feel. I'm not being ironic about it. It's like, make me feel anxious. That's good.
No,
it's good. It's
make me feel alive again, Snake.
Yeah,
yes,
it's good.
No,
yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. It's good writing. Like, to be able, as someone who I think is somewhat funny, or at least tries to make people laugh, like, it's not that hard to make people laugh or kind of get people. It's really hard to make people feel some of these other things, you know? And I think that's pretty impressive. It's easy to make you scared, but to make you anxious and like nervous, that's cool.
Well, that's what I loved about the Twilight Zone, right? Is it's in the time of the censors. They really couldn't show a lot. So it's all this kind of existential dread, which is what I really love out of horror. And Black Mirror takes the concepts from Twilight Zone that has the devils and angels and supernatural magics and things and puts it all in technology. And that can be scarier when you realize how close some of the things are, whether it's apps and social media or whatever else they're talking about in that episode. And I like that about Black Mirror. I do think some of them are a little cruel. I used to think about Twilight Zone as kind of the nice version of these morality tales, and then the Outer Limits at the time was the cruel version. And I think Black Mirror goes a little bit more in Outer Limits direction than I love, but both are great classic shows. And I think my favorite Black Mirror is actually what I think of as the happiest Black Mirror. It's the one that I always want to call La Cañada, which it isn't. But it's a Spanish, it's a Spanish town name. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite because I love the aesthetic and I love the 80s vibes and I love the whole concept of the afterlife that they explore in that episode. But it is a Black Mirror episode that doesn't really end with kind of coldness and fright.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, San Junipero is a very memorable episode for that reason. That was a really special season. The only episode in that season that I think it was that season that I didn't like was the one that tied them all together, which really annoyed me. The one at the museum where it was like, it suggested that a lot of these things happen in the same universe. And I'm like, that's so fucking stupid. Yeah. Why can't you just leave? Why do you have to be so cute all the time? Can't you just leave things alone and not reference other shows and stuff? It's like, ugh. But nonetheless, Charlie Brooker, that's the guy's name, right? He's fucking smart, man. The guy that writes those. Really,
I think he's worried about technology, but yes.
yes, he's clear. Yeah, for people that don't know, Twilight Zone and Black Mirror differ in that Black Mirror is very focused on tech and like what technology specifically can do.
Well, Black Mirror is specifically a reference to your phone, right? I mean, it's a scrying device in ancient times, but it's a reference to your phone.
Right. Yeah, it's good shit. Highly recommended. All right.
Well, let's end with one last these that I had on the list.
Sure.
Would you rather have the ability to see 10 minutes into the future or 150 years into the future? And so I imagine the way this question is posed that you could do this consistently, that you could at any time see 10 minutes into the future, or you could at any time see 150. Not that it's a one-time thing. I read it that way, at least, of like your ability that you can use perpetually is either 10 minutes or 150 years.
This is interesting because I think, and Hogue, you'd probably agree, it would be trivially easy to become massively wealthy by seeing 10 minutes into the future.
Yeah, I was thinking that either way, really. Like you could figure out who the winners in the stock market are with a 150 year view. But with 10 minutes, you could just go around the Powerball and figure out what it is that you're supposed to have. So 10 minutes is my inclination. I also think I would be less disoriented with whatever the world might be in 150 years. Versus 10 minutes from now. So I would take 10 minutes.
It's funny you brought up like the lotto, because that's a really good point. Because I was thinking of a similar thing, which was sports betting for some reason, where I'm like, you could pull like crazy parlays. This person shoots next, then this person scores, then this person misses. And like you could just guess and win insane amounts of money. You get kicked out of every casino in Vegas because you would be winning too much. You're right about the 150-year view. What would be interesting about that is if you care more about legacy and long game, is it's not even the companies that survive. It's kind of crazy to think about this, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Apple in 150 years or Tesla or whatever. But it would be more about like what people were using and what people were doing. And could you get in on that at like that would be the best way to create generational power, is if like you realize that this whatever it was, some technology, some ore, some gas, something that we have a lot of that we don't give a shit about or whatever right now. And you kind of co-opted that immediately and just sat on it, whatever it would be. I don't know. And then you come like that would be an interesting way to create real power, as opposed to like immediate wealth. Because whatever you would execute on you could put money in a company and it can go up and down and then end up being this huge company in the future, but you'll probably not be around to see it. So the 10-minute stuff is the more obvious one. But if you wanted to really be a strategist, it would be interesting to know 150 years ahead of time and like what you could possibly get going for your progenitors, I guess, to take advantage of.
I'd be concerned that they wouldn't listen to me, right? Oh, Gramps had this investment in this thing that's clearly never going anywhere. And you have a very strongly written letter that says, don't sell this for God's sakes. But, 3 generations down, we lose our connection to the guy that could see the future. So I'd be worried about that, but I'm constantly worried about my descendants and family line. So who knows? Certainly, I think you make a good point that the 150-year view would allow the potential for greater gains long term, but they wouldn't be realized by you. Right. And certainly from a selfish standpoint, 10 minutes you can turn into real wealth pretty fast.
Also, would there be a butterfly effect that would affect the outcome as being positive? In other words, let's say, I love this idea. Trump doesn't talk about it anymore, but he brought up this idea of building new cities, which I think is a really cool idea. We don't really need them, but it's an interesting idea to say, like, we're going to build like 10 cities or whatever. And imagine you knew that new cities were going to sprout in the middle of, they find some, in the Dakotas or something, and you go and buy a bunch of land where the city is going to be. But then when in the timeline, the appropriate decision makers get to that, they're like, oh, this guy owns all this land, forget it. And like you kind of miss out on it. Like in other words, I wouldn't want to fuck around with fate too much by making assumptions of where we would end up on the timeline. It asks too many guarantees. And
I guess my view of this power is that you have a third eye that you can close in the back of your head and just live and see whatever the time frame is that we're talking about. So you would see that adjust in real time and then be able to adjust for it again until it worked, right? This is the notion of Groundhog Day or Butterfly Effect or anything else that you watch here where it's like, well, somebody could have gone through it 10,000 times, right? In Edge of Tomorrow, whatever that wound up being called, you see one time where Tom Cruise goes to the office and avoids everybody. And you realize that just for the number of things he has to do in that walk, that has to be the 15,000th time they've tried it, right? And they all ended with game over screens before then. And it's like, I do think that if you had a power that you could continuously use, you could adjust for it and that kind of thing. But yeah, they would adjust for, oh, Colin owns all of this part of land. And then you try to get into the Disney model, right, of buying up all of Orlando without anybody noticing and that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. Well said. I love these kinds of what ifs because there's obviously, again, it goes back to what I was saying about Social Security. And for people that don't know, like if you accept Social Security as soon as you're allowed, which I think is like 63 and a half or something at this point, depending on who you are, you like get a certain amount of money a month and that's it for like forever. And you'll go up with COLA and all of that kind of stuff, cost of living. But if you wait, I think you can wait as long as like 74 or something like that. And then if you wait all of that time, you get way more money a month. But people argue, like I've seen Susie Orman and like pop financial people argue like you would be stupid to wait. Like you take the money now.
Because there's real questions about the program's survival.
Right. And I guess actuarially, right?
I like it. I'll accept that pronunciation.
Yeah, sure. I did the best I could. I guess they were arguing like you don't ultimately make as much money. Like take the money now, invest it now, whatever you would do, spend it now. It's interesting. I love, and again, it goes into the argument of like paying off your mortgage or giving your money to an advisor that says like your mortgage rate's fucking 3%. I can make 8%. It's like, shut up. But there is... There
psychologically, I don't like the debt.
Yeah. There's something about it that's interesting, you know. Anyway.
No, this was a really excellent discussion. I think we had fun with this. I'll also say I'll take the 10 minutes into the future, but I had no financial like thing in mind. I just wanted to like re-roll my social, you know, kind of options, like a video game, basically. Like, okay, if I say this, you know, what's going to happen in 10 minutes if I start a conversation with this person? And just, that's really what I had in mind was like, oh, is this going to start an argument?
There you go.
Oh, you know, is there going to be a line at Starbucks? You know,
avoiding awkward social situations is a totally valid use of your 10-minute time power.
Yeah. Checking the traffic, seeing who's at the doctor's office. You know, I just had a really in mind of like, oh man, just imagine if you could just see 10 minutes into the future at any point in time. That'd be fantastic. But yeah, I think you guys would actually have made use of it, you know, playing the ponies and whatnot. I would have just been trying to avoid a line at the grocery store.
We go immediately into the plot of Back to the Future 2. Sorry.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's funny, man. Like I love the idea of like some sort of mildly supernaturalistic thing like this, where you have like, is it possible, especially seeing forward in time, which is possible, like physically, right? It's going backwards. That is, I guess, in Einsteinian physics, Newtonian physics, like not possible. I'm not like obviously a physicist or whatever, but like we know how to move forward in time, like quickly. Like, could we figure out, and it's by speed and relativity and all that, but like, could you figure out a way to do it and get that information back, you know? Or are you really always going to be stuck there? And I guess fundamentally, since you can never go back, you are fundamentally stuck. Like you've skipped that time. Interstellar gets into this, which is one of the things I really love about it, you know? And I just read, I've been recommending it to everyone. The Project Hail Mary book by Andy Weir is also about this. About
well, like one of my favorite adventure games of all time was a game called Mission Critical, which was a full motion video adventure game in the 90s. And I had purchased it, or my dad had purchased it, primarily because it starred Michael Dorn, aka Worf, from Star Trek The Next Generation. And you don't know what it's about, really. You're just on a derelict spacecraft and trying to figure out what happened and what went wrong. But one of the things that it's fundamentally about at the end, spoiler alert for an adventure game that's in full motion video, and I don't even know if you can buy it, but it's 30 years old. But spoiler alert is that it's about the fact that you can't time travel, but you can transmit information on radio waves that travel sufficiently so that you can affect the past with the information from the future. And I always really liked this notion of time travel because it got around nicely some of the paradoxical stuff. And it has a whole series of things that you deal with, information from the future, as well as drone combat, like AI combat, and how those things work together in a space environment. So buy Mission Critical. I have no idea if it's available to purchase, not just for Michael Dorn, but for the fun speculative fiction things that it does with its story. It really is one of my favorites.
Yeah, that sounds cool. It's funny, man, because it frustrates me just from like of course this is the case kind of situation. Going forward in time is useless when you really think about it. It like Interstellar is about how it fucks everything up and like how they can't really control it as they need to fix things in the moment, but they're sacrificing the time in order to do the work, and you can't get that time back. As opposed to like someone comes from the future or from the past into the future and they're useless. They only know what has happened and nothing else, as opposed to being able to go backwards, which is not possible, and how useful that would be, you know, like time travelers from the future coming to the past. I don't know. It just pisses me off so much. That's how you know, in my opinion, that's how you know it's not possible, like physically. Not only that the way we interpret physics says it's not possible, but that we have no visitors. They're not.
Well, I've long had a notion, I'm not a novelist, I'm not a writer, but I've long had a notion that to do a time travel story, you would have to account for the lack of visitors. And I had always thought that you could do it as ghosts and ghost stories. That those supernatural events that we can't explain, that are kind of on the edges of our periphery, are actually time travelers that we're trying to adjust something. And that's how you account for that in your storytelling. But that's because I like science fiction and fantasy, and I thought combining them would be fun.
I love that. Have you read the Andy Weir books? I've read all 3 of them now.
I love the Martian movie, but I have not read his book or his new one.
Yeah, there's one in between 2 that I read, which is the worst, I think, of the 3, although it's good. Artemis. It's like a murder mystery on the moon.
Okay.
Like at a moon base. And it's pretty cool. But this new one is about the newer one. It's from 2021, but they're making a movie about it, I guess. And that's kind of what attracted my attention. Is it's about like Earth, like scientists on Earth discover that the sun is becoming less luminous, like mildly. And they figure out that it's like this, ultimately this, and this is like in the beginning of the book, so it doesn't really matter near the beginning of the book, is that they ultimately find out that it's like this microbe, this like alien microbe that is like an extremophile and can live on the surface or near the surface of the sun. And it like absorbs everything, and about how they have to go on this like kind of crazy, they send some humans on a mission towards a star they realize is unaffected to see if they can get any evidence, and they call it the Hail Mary or whatever, because they're all fucked, and it's pretty good. But The Martian's really, really special book. I think I really, really like that book a lot. I highly recommend it for people that haven't read it.
I should check it out. I love the movie. The movie reminds me of my grandfather. The Hogues are scientists for a long time, and my grandfather worked at Borg Warner. And used to talk about the space program and solving problems much the way that movie does and those speeches are. And I think it's great, but I have not tried the book yet.
And yeah, that's good. I mean, I would love to be able to talk to people about that kind of stuff. I'm obsessed with space travel. Like, I don't really talk about it very much, and it doesn't come up, obviously, but it's like I'm totally obsessed with these suicide mission ideas and all the kind of stuff, like even going to Mars, nonetheless, interstellar travel. And we're not going to see, I don't think we're going to see it, which is like in our lifetime, which is a bummer, but I think we'll see like travel to other planets in our lifetime. But what a dream, like what an amazing dream that is. It's just, it's what the most incredible thing to me. And
I love it.
Especially discovering life, which I think life exists everywhere in the galaxy, but I do think that space and time preclude us from finding each other, probably in most cases, because people think it's always, and this, it's like we're close to a bunch of stars within 10 light years of them,
Well, yes, for certain definitions of close.
Right,
yes.
right. Like, yeah, exactly. We're like within 10 light years of, I don't know, 80 stars or something like that. And which is like, it would take light 10 years, as people know, to travel that distance. And it would take us like 600,000 years, I think, to get to Alpha Centauri or something, which is one of the closest ones with our current technology. But but people think about space and all that, but I think about time, about how old systems are, and how like we've only been putting out evidence of our existence for less than 100 years. You would imagine Mass Effect gets a little bit into this, but they don't even get into it on the cosmic level that I'm thinking of it, like where you can miss a society by billions of years, like, and how interesting that is to me. Like you're in the right place, but you're way, way late. And that's, I think, going to be the thing that stops us from finding it, because I'm not like a rare Earth guy or anything like that. I think it's fairly obvious that there's got to be life.
Did you watch or read Three Body Problem?
I'm reading it now, actually. But did you read it?
I didn't read it. I watched the Netflix show. I was surprised at how much I liked it. And they get into Fermi's paradox a little bit and some of the things there. And I think it's really interesting stuff. I tend to agree that there seems mathematically strong likelihood that there should be life out there somewhere. But will it ever cross our paths? Don't know.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I don't think people are probing cows and making crop circles.
No. I love the idea that those guys are like, they get into like different parallel universe or like realities and stuff. Like the things people are saying are going on with like the UFO or what they call UAP situation is so fascinating in and of itself. But Yeah, I'm reading the book now. I'm like probably 3/5 of the way through it, maybe a little more. And I don't know how the show goes. I want to watch the show once I get through the book. It's a little frustrating me just from the sense that I'm like more than halfway through it now, and they're still not into like what I know the book is about. Where I'm like, it's like this is about aliens, right? Are we ever? It
is. I can verify
them? Huh?
I can verify it's about aliens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why my whole thing is like, are we ever going to talk about aliens? Because I'm on like page 300, and I have no idea what the fuck is going on. So it's a little annoying from that front, but it's fun. It's good to read.
Well, I was very unhappy with the way D&D finished Game of Thrones, as obviously is not a hot take or unusual take on the end of that series. But I was very happy with how they adapted this book, not knowing the book itself, but seeing how difficult certain aspects of that story are to bring to a screen at all. So I do think the Netflix Three Body Problem show is well worth everybody's time.
Yeah, I definitely like to check it out. Actually, the books, I bought like the trilogy. Is the series only about the first book? Do you know?
The first season is the first book.
Oh, okay, cool. Netflix so we can watch it soon.
Netflix has picked it up for 2 more seasons.
Okay, great. Yeah, so there was like, I think there's 5 maybe books now, but I know that it was written originally as a trilogy. And I bought that on Amazon. It was like $22. It was very affordable. And but there's like a Netflix logo on the box.
Yeah, that's how they do.
Yeah. So, and I actually, when I bought Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones books, I only read the first 2 because they're so fucking dense. I'm like, I can't stand it. Like, it's so good, but I'm like sitting there being like, are we really still on this topic? I've been floating around the pool for 90 minutes. We're in the same scene. Like, let's move on. So that was what it was. It was great, but it's just too dense for me. This is a little more brisk, which is nice. And Andy Weir's books are like that too. Although I think it's cool that Three Body Problem is a series, because I'm of the mind, and I know you've not read it, but people out there will probably agree about Project Hail Mary is, I'm like, why are you making this into a movie? It's so complex. Like, it's a great mini series. Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, Mike, are you satisfied?
Oh, yes. Yeah. This was fun. We had some excellent segues, I feel. Thanks for being good sports about the silly questions as well as the more serious ones.
I just liked your email, Micah, about we're going to play Would You Rather, and it's going to be light. They're from Parade Magazine. As if I would go, what are you going to ask me? What do I need? Do I need 2 truths and a lie ready to go? I don't know.
That's the thing, because it's like, I know, like, would you rather? It's like, oh, would you rather jack off a hobo or swallow some nails? Like, I just thought I wanted you guys to feel at ease that it wasn't going to be that today.
No, I appreciate that. Those are funny, like the more childhood ones where it's like, yeah, would you rather fuck this or fucking suck this? But like, it is a little reductive, isn't it?
I remember Colin, it was a classic kind of funny moment. The whole thing of like, would you either fuck a goat and no one will ever know, or you don't fuck it and everyone thinks you did. And I remember you were like the only one who was like, I'm not going to fuck that goat. I don't care if everyone thinks I did it. I'm not going to fuck that
that's
goat.
Because that's right. I remember that because I was bringing up, my dad said something to me. I mean, it's just a basic thing, but it's stuck with me my whole life, which was like, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or says about you if it's not true. Like, it does. And obviously that's very reductive. It matters a fucking great deal, actually. But you could still, like, what's true. And and I didn't fuck that goat. So you can think that I did, but I know that not only did I not do it, but I know that you did. You did fuck the goat. If you made the other decision. And everyone can think that you didn't, but you have to live with yourself. It's like committing a murder and getting away with it. You never know when someone's going to bust through the door and get you. All right.
That is true. That's what we say in law school.
Yes. All right. Let's see. There's only 2 more of us, obviously. So, Hope, let's go to you next for your topic.
Sure. So I was on vacation the last couple of weeks, but I was following social media a little bit. And one of my buddies in the YouTube lawyer community, Ian Runkle, was giving away a copy of Colonization for the 4th of July. And this got me thinking about the fact that I have playlists on Steam for the 4th of July, which is called America's Birthday on my playlist, and some other holidays. And I very much like to combine the feelings or hype, if you will, I have for special events, holidays, potentially even other media that I've consumed, watched, read, or otherwise, and mix it up with games that I'm playing, board games I'm playing, other TV shows. And I was wondering whether any of you did the same. I like to have that vibe going along with whatever the holiday is. And for the 4th of July, I play Colonization. On my list on Steam, I have Assassin's Creed 3. I have World in Conflict, which is an older real-time strategy game on the PC. But there's a lot of ways that you can take it with any of these holidays. And so I was wondering if any of you did the same, because I do find that it helps keep your rotation of games or whatever else you're experiencing fresh, as well as help you hit the backlog if that's your problem as well.
What do you think, Micah? It's funny because a lot of people are curious about this, because I find you can really find this with film with a lot of people, and it's easier to digest in that way. So, but I want to hear from you first.
Yeah. So, Rick, when you sent the email and mentioned 4th of July, I didn't take that literally. I thought you were just throwing out a holiday. And I was like, oh, that'd be an interesting one to have a games list for. And of course you actually did. And that's fantastic.
And it gets weird, right? The thing about this question is that it doesn't have to just be what you think of the most obviously, like Colonization, about the colonization of America. It really does go with 4th of July very quickly. But I have like on that list, Saints Row 4. Where you're the president and you're fighting aliens, right? And that's like vaguely American-ish. Like you can have all of these lists that capture a vibe and aren't necessarily a direct kind of thing. So I was really curious.
Oh, absolutely. So the big one for me is, of course, Halloween. I do enjoy scary things, primarily books, but I do love to play a horror game every now and then. Halloween time, the entire month of October, is spooky time for me. I love getting out my Halloween decorations. Some of them stay out year round. You can't see it, but over on my desk, I have this candy corn decoration, and he's out all year because I just love him so much. So I love Halloween, and that's the time for me to bring out a scary game. I'll usually start one early in October, kind of peck away at it throughout the month because I have a very low tolerance for scary things that aren't books. And I love that feeling of the chill is supposed to be starting in the air. It doesn't always start around here in October, but
it does in Michigan.
The leaves. Yeah, the leaves are supposed to be changing. The chill in the air, the mini candy is out at the stores. Although we went to Cracker Barrel and they already had their Halloween stuff out. It's fucking July. So
yeah, that was
corporate America is kind of ruining my
vibe. We were met with that stuff. I'm like, damn.
Yeah. In July, like August is acceptable for me because back home, August does start to cool down a bit. You get to that first week of September and it does feel like summer's over and we're starting to get some chilly overnights already. The leaves are starting to change. But here in the South, to see Halloween stuff in July, especially, it's like, man, we're sweating out there. I can't be thinking about pumpkins.
Fucking life out here, and you're selling me jack-o'-lanterns.
They had candy corn out, which I was thrilled. I love candy corn. I always stock up so I have enough to get me through spring. Like I'm some frontiersman going to the general store twice a year, and I got to be stocked up on sugar. But so yeah, spooky times. I try to play a spooky game every year.
I love Halloween as an answer because I think that there's multiple ways that you can do Halloween, right? When I think about what games or other things that I do at Halloween, the games I play often go in the nature of Halloween specifically and not the horror side. So I'll play like Medieval, which is a comic game about a skeleton, and like Double Fine had a game called Costume Quest.
Mm-hmm.
You're a bunch of little kids that go on an RPG, and you can approach Halloween that way, or you can play Until Dawn and Dead Space and Biohazard or whatever else you want to play that is strictly horror. And those are fun. I feel the same way as you do, Micah, about October. That's a month that I specifically set aside for those kind of horror vibes. Every Friday night at Hogue House in October, my family and a family friend come by and we watch a couple horror movies. And that's how I brought my eldest daughter up into the world of adult movies, actually, by saying every 5 minutes, now don't do anything these kids are about to do in the woods. You'll see what's going to happen to them. Don't do any of this. And she's enjoyed those, and I enjoy those.
No, that's awesome to be able to kind of share that tradition as well. I think my other answer is winter just in general, not specifically Christmas, but we'll get there. Winter, I love snow levels in games. And like any JRPG that has a snowy area, that's always my favorite level. Anything with snow. I am Setsuna being set in this like snowy landscape.
With that
So
piano. Oh, yeah.
exactly. Oh, the soundtrack is fantastic.
So wonderful.
And I just played Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There's a whole snowy area in that game. And that was one of my favorite sections because I just adored the snow. So as we get into winter, I immediately want those cozy kind of snowy games. And then, of course, with Christmas itself, same deal of I love anything that has winter themes. But also with Christmas is a favorite tradition of playing Call of Duty on Christmas and obliterating the Christmas noobs because I've been playing since the game came out and all the kids just got the game for Christmas. And it is just a glory like no other to just mow through all these kids and it's their first day having the game and before the ranking system gets it all right and kind of shuttles them to where they should be. And it's just always a great time playing Call of Duty on Christmas. And I mean,
Teaching those
Thanksgiving also
10-year-olds
feels like
something
that.
about the world.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you just fired up the Xbox and you're on Call of Duty. Well, so am I, kiddos. So am I. And I'm really looking forward to that this year. Actually, I didn't get the new Call of Duty last year, but this year I'm super excited about it. And so Thanksgiving also feels like a Call of Duty holiday in a sense. You get home from dinner, you hop online for a while. But yeah, Christmas noobs on Call of Duty, an ageless tradition. That's another thing that just feels like Christmas to me.
I like those non-obvious ones as well, right? Because like the brand, the Lord of the Rings, is one that I consistently associate with Christmas, both because of some of the themes in those books and movies, but also because they released in December when they originally came out, all three of them. And so that's one that I tend to go back to at the holidays. My Christmas go-to game right now is Spider-Man Miles Morales. I think that has some of the best Christmas feels in kind of modern gaming. So that's definitely one that I enjoy then. But I also, it's not limited to holidays. I also sometimes like to just match up what else I'm experiencing, right? We were just talking about Three Body Problem. When I watched that on Netflix, I immediately wanted to watch the horror movie Annihilation, which I think matches up that vibe pretty well. And I also played the video game Pacific Drive. And those all kind of had that same kind of unknowable cosmic horror feel to them. And I like that. I like to get onto a vibe and go along with that. And I think people should try it more often, honestly, because I think it does add longevity to things that you might have forgotten that you enjoyed.
I'm looking up this Annihilation film. Someone had recommended this to me, and I have not watched it yet.
I love Annihilation.
Yeah.
It is existential dread on screen.
Starring
It should be Natalie Portman.
Long Island's own Natalie Portman.
There you
go. So yeah, I got to check that out. I don't watch movies anymore. Like
we really don't. Like we wanted to see The Northman. I wanted to see The Northman when it was out in theaters, right?
And that would go perfectly with Hellblade 2.
And we just didn't get around to seeing it. And then Colin's like, oh, well, it's on Amazon Prime. And I was like, all right. And we just have never watched it. And I really want to see it still, but we don't think about movies. We sit down and typically we're playing games or we might be catching up on our favorite YouTube channels that we share. But I really just genuinely don't think, hey, do you want to watch a movie this weekend? It doesn't even pop into my head. We're just not really movie people. I'd like to change that slightly, only because I do have like a short list of movies that I'd like to watch with you. Like, Colin, I don't know. Have you ever seen The Wrestler?
No.
Which is like my favorite.
I know it, but
The Wrestler is one of my all-time favorite movies. And it's something, it's like I own it on Blu-ray. It's like one of my all-time favorites. I've wanted to watch that with Colin since I met him. And we just haven't, but it's like we just don't really think about movies. So I'd like to slightly adjust that.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, it's funny because I feel the same way. I think about movies quite often, but I'm just like, you know. But the reality is when I see a movie, and I've seen a million movies, obviously, but I rarely regret it, you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Letters to Juliet was the last one I really regretted. I was like, no, you know what? Leap Day was worse. I watched all those rom-coms back in the day, and they were so bad. They were so bad. But Letters to Juliet was One of the worst things I've ever seen.
I don't think I know that movie.
Oh, it's that Amanda Seyfried woman
Oh
with
yeah,
the big eyes.
from Mean Girls.
Yeah. Yeah, they were just those romantic comedies when I was in high school, the like early 2010s were just terrible. The Time Traveler's Wife, Leap Day, there were so many of them. And I saw all of them in theaters because what else was there to do for $8? It was an activity we could afford. It was appropriate as deemed by the church. So we went to the movies a lot. And man, just looking through like my old ticket stubs, it's like we saw some just garbage, just some real garbo movies back in the day.
No, I was the same. I said from probably 1992 to 2001 or something. I saw pretty much every movie you can possibly think of. Like we would
That's
go to
a good era, though.
It was a good era. We would just go to the movies. It was awesome. It's stealing, but I would pay for a ticket and then just kind of stay, and see another movie. I did that all the time. Like my dad would drop me up, be like, all right, come back in like 4 hours. And then I would like go see some movie and then I would like time it to go like just go into another one and see that too. And I used to just go, I was there almost every weekend probably at times, just seeing something. So it was part of the culture. It's obviously not that way anymore.
Yeah, I love movies. That's my primary passive, right? So as I tell my wife, occasionally I have to eat. And I don't play video games and eat at the same time very well. So I will turn on a TV show or a movie, depending on what I feel like. But movies are my primary kind of passive entertainment. So that's what I like to combine. And absolutely, The Northman is a perfect match for Hellblade 2. They are very similar in tone. So
I would love for Hogue to set up some sort of website or service where you curate experiences for people. So it's like, okay, you're going to play Hellblade. This same week, you're going to watch The Northman, and perhaps you also select a book for them to read. And you kind of have like their month planned out of like, oh, you want Viking theme for the month? Here you go. Like, oh, you want horror theme for the month? I would love for you to set this up. I don't want any part of the work, but I'm giving you this idea very graciously.
It's pretty funny. I've thought about potentially having something called like a pop culture sommelier. And just combining these things in a way that would be appropriate, because I really do believe that you can get more value out of them that way. And I've had some success with like my brother and some other folks, helping them engage with things that they didn't enjoy as much with other perspectives and things like movies and books and video games at the same time. So I love that. I love themes. I love being excited about things, right? I love college football just came out this last week, and I'm excited for the college football season to start next month. I mean, I love that kind of being excited for something, being happy about something, loving life, as it were.
For me, it's funny, like, and this had come up earlier, is just as opposed to there's some examples of this not being true, but as opposed to being like a Christmas themed or winter themed game or movie or whatever being around Christmas, it's more about like what games and this is, I think what you were saying with Call of Duty, Micah, is just like, it's like what games I just reference with Christmas. Like Mega Man 3 reminds me of Christmas because I got it for Christmas. Link to the Past reminds me of Christmas because I got it for Christmas. Xenogears and stuff. It's like Metal Gear Solid. As opposed to those games being about Christmas, like my favorite Christmas game is probably The Division, which I love. And I love that game for that reason, actually, because it's fucking so creepy that this all happened during Christmas. So there's just Christmas decorations for years, just everywhere. It's a great idea. It's a really great idea. So I guess with like, in terms of Christmas, I guess like maybe a movie like Home Alone or something is like kind of a Christmas time movie that I get into the mood with. And there's music certainly when it comes to Christmas specifically that it's on my master playlist that I'll just skip until like the 3 months around Christmas. So like my favorite Christmas song is Christmas Wrapping by the Waitresses. And that song, and I love that song. That song comes up and I'm like, yeah, it's July. I can't listen to that right now. It doesn't make any sense. It's got like jingle bells in it and
all right. If I get Mariah Carey coming up on Spotify, All I Want for Christmas Is You, never a skip. Never a skip. I'll listen to that song any time of year.
Fair enough. So yeah, I'm not much more. It really is about what things remind me of the holidays and times of year and periods of time that I experienced them first, as opposed to them being themed in any way. Or the connection, I've said many, many times, I connect Majora's Mask and Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, their third record, because I got them the same day at the mall. And then I listened to one while I played the other, and I always think of them together. And that was in the fall or whatever. So yeah, I'm not much of I also just don't go back to things very often. Very rare exceptions will I go back and really play things again or watch things again. More likely with TV and movies, I truly feel like I get into a mode where I definitely forget what happened. I was talking about this with I played Wild Arms 2 recently again. I haven't played it since high school, and I was playing it and I'm like, I don't remember one fucking thing about this game. Like, I don't remember this at all. I know I played it and I know I beat it.
Not to be traumatic to Micah, but my primary memory of Wild Arms is whistling.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, the wonderful song and the music and those games are awesome. Can't wait for the there's that I kickstarted it. I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Wild Arms guy doing a Wild Arms game, but it's not a Wild Arms game. I'm really excited about that. I think it comes out next year. So yeah, that's kind of like my simple answer to this. Is it's more about just the time of year and the happenstance of having something related to that time of year, as opposed to it belonging to a specific holiday, a specific feel, a specific season.
That's totally fair, but you never seek it out. You never try to make a vibe.
Not really. I mean,
okay.
I love what I think you said about Lord of the Rings, right? Being Christmas movies. And you're right. They are. Dagan and I and my family, when I was a senior in high school, went and saw Fellowship in the movie theater on Christmas. And I remember that. So that is somewhat associated with it, but I would never like seek it out that time of year. And to that point, I know a few people too that it's a pretty common thing, I think, since you had brought it up, is like watching Lord of the Rings every year, or having like a little bit of a watch-a-thon around the fall, around the winter. I totally dig that. And with games, like you're right. It's always, I remember being really annoyed that Until Dawn came out so much earlier than it should have during 2015 to like, I think it came out in August or something. I'm like, why are you releasing this now? Like, I don't even understand like why you're releasing this right now. And it takes place like in the fucking woods in Canada in the winter. It's like, doesn't make any sense. And I do think I agree with you that you can aim those things better. And they're going to do that better with the Until Dawn remake that's coming out later this year that I think will be more framed around Halloween. And so when I seek out a horror game or whatever, it would be nice to play it when the days are shorter and the leaves are crisp and all that kind of stuff. But it's unfortunate that these things just seem to come out whenever. I think Resident Evil 8 came out in like the spring. It's like, well, this is the best we can do. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So I don't really look to relate those things too much. It's not super necessary to me.
Totally fair.
Yeah. Anything else to say about this topic? I feel like we haven't gone very long on it. We don't have to. I mean, we don't have to go long on it. No?
No, I'm good. I'm satisfied with your answers.
All right, excellent. So we've been talking about books, and I wanted to talk about, to wrap things up, about reading. And what role it plays in our lives, and if we find it kind of an essential form of entertainment or information or whatever. Now, I want to frame it through this, and I know I bring this up on the show every so often, kind of in jest, but it's surprising to me how somehow society is becoming more illiterate. It seems like people are not reading as well as they used to. Kids are not learning to read properly. I've recommended many times there's that radio or that podcast documentary about the whole like model of reading that they've been pushing for the last 20 years and how fucked up it is and how it's totally wrong about having kids like guess words and shit like that. And like, do you know what I'm talking about, Hogue? Like, there's like, I don't know if your kids went through
the whole word
like,
versus phonics, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like they weren't, I guess, for like 20 years. I guess they're kind of going back, but not teaching kids how to like sound things out and like consonants and vowels.
When my kids were in like first, second, and third grade, they were not teaching phonics and not enforcing spelling. It's one of the reasons that we pulled them to a different school.
That's totally, hold on, I'm looking up to see if I can find this. It's totally insane that like anyone thought, yeah, it's called Sold a Story, how teaching kids to read went so wrong. And it's basically about this, like, it's somewhat of a conspiracy, I guess, about these academics in the late 90s that came around and said like, oh, actually, you teach kids how to read this way instead. And it's about like guessing placement of like what makes sense in a certain place and like identifying words by the way they look and what would just fit there, and realizing over many years that this was totally bullshit and that everyone bought in on it, and it majorly affected generations of kids' abilities to read. And it's unthinkable to me because reading is pretty important to me, but it seems like so much more relevant than ever. I just played Pentiment, and it's funny, you encounter people in that game that can read and encounter people in that world that can't read, and you can understand in this pastoral basic world how a person can probably get by without reading. But I look around today and I'm like, how is it that you don't know how to read? How is it that you don't know what words mean when you have a phone in front of your face all day and tablets and computers? It's nonsensical and it's crazy. And then I read a statistic that really only 1 in 10 American adults read books ever. Like not just sometimes, but like will ever read books. And I was like, damn, that's pretty bad. Now, teach their own. I don't think it really means anything if you read or not, as far as like the character of who you are, or even how smart you are, or it might affect what you know. But I found that reading has actually taken more and more of a backseat in my own life as I've gotten older. I was a prodigious reader for much of my life and would always have a book going, basically. And these days, I really only read over the summer when I can float around in the pool, because otherwise I'm just majorly distracted by all these screens and responsibilities and games and TV shows and YouTube and the internet and all this other stuff. So I was just kind of wondering, as we wrap this up, how reading fits into your lives today. And Hogue, we'll go to you first. Are you a reader of books? Seems like you are.
Not as much as I would like to be. This kind of comes down to why I also don't game on the PC as much as I do on console, which, as I explain it to people, is that I don't like to sit at my work computer when I don't have to. And so my job at some fundamental level is reading. I read contracts, I review contracts, I write contracts. It's not the same. You're not reading for pleasure. It's not fiction. It's not that kind of thing. But parsing words, understanding sentences, and more specifically in the framework of law, trying to think about how someone else might be trying to hide the ball in the way they wrote this particular sentence is my job, right? So thinking very hard about how things are written is what I do. It's really where one of my shows came from, Hangouts and Headlines, was seeing how people were communicating things with headlines and the way articles were written, and understanding that folks were not necessarily, even folks that were really trying to critically read these articles, were not necessarily kind of paying attention to how the sleight of hand works with grammar and words and passive voice and things like that, and thinking that I could hopefully help that interpretation and understanding, because at a baseline level, I think I'm a pretty good reader. That's mostly what I sell to my clients at some level. And so I don't read outside of work as much as I would like. Now, I'm just coming off of a long vacation where I did read a couple of books. But they were not any great philosophical treatises. I read a book about an AI war with China, I think, that was very Tom Clancy-esque, very airport type books. But back in the day, I used to absolutely love, like the one I think of the most, the one that I carried around with me in my backpack, right, was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was very much my type of comedy, very dry wit, very British humor. With a science fiction comedy kind of setup. And that was my favorite set of books. That is the 5-book trilogy of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I recommend it to everybody, but you do have to have a certain tolerance for kind of acerbic British wit. And I don't get to read those kinds of things, those big long form novels, as much as I used to, certainly.
Yeah, it's funny. I've gone through fits and starts throughout my whole life of really, really, really being into reading, and then kind of it being more passive, but it's been more out of my life now than ever. Like I'm only reading probably 6 or 8 books a year, which is pretty low, and they're not huge books, and it all takes place within like a 4-month period. Because for some reason I just don't want to read when I'm not in the pool or outside anymore. I feel I have this like desire to multitask. And it's infiltrated every part of my life. Now, Micah, I live with you, obviously, so I know that reading plays a huge role in your life. But the audience obviously doesn't. So where are you on the art of reading?
Yeah, so I'm actually right now participating in a summer reading challenge for adults, and it's run through bookshop.org, which is a really cool website that I like just because you can order books through them. They're a nonprofit site, and they donate money to either an independent bookstore of your choice, or the money just sort of goes to a pool that is paid out to a network of independent bookstores. But so I have been participating in their summer reading challenge, and it's been really fun because I can't think of the last time I had to log reading in some way. And it's also been cool to actually see tangible numbers of how many minutes I read this week, how many pages I read this week. Because I do try to, I got really in a bad habit of not reading for a while. Just I always felt too anxious. I couldn't quiet my mind down. And eventually I just said, you just have to force yourself to do it. And so I've started reading every day when I wake up and reading before bed. I have also just been more apt to discard a book that I'm not jiving with versus, forcing myself to finish it, which has helped. And so I've been really happy with this summer reading challenge. I also set the goal for myself to read some classics. I went to a vocational high school, so we didn't have assigned reading in the way that other schools did. We had to read a certain number of pages per trimester, but we weren't necessarily assigned specific books to read because you have a week of academics, a week of your shop. By the time you get back to academics, it's hard for the teacher to get everybody back to where they were in the lesson 2 weeks ago. So we didn't have to read a lot of classics and things like that I feel like I missed out on. So that's been my summer project. I have so far read Jane Eyre, Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park. I got on a real Jane Austen kick. I'd like to try again with Pride and Prejudice. The first time I read it, it seemed really boring. But you got to kind of put yourself in the mindset of an 1800s person in terms of what they consider scandalous, in terms of what they consider a big deal. It all feels so trivial as someone living in the 2020s of like, oh, he held her hand and everybody in the book is freaking out. And then you're kind of like, well, you got to put yourself in the time period of like at the time, that would have been huge. All right. At the time, they might as well have slept together. And so I kind of reframing my mind for some of these classics that I'm reading has been interesting. And also just learning a lot about the way they're, how different things were, of course. So I've been really enjoying this kind of challenge that I'm participating in from the website, and also the challenge I imposed on myself to read classics. But like when I think about books in terms of the entertainment factor, like I recently read Misery, and it was my first time reading it. And I was so hooked. I read that book in 3 days. I couldn't put it down. It was like binging a show on Netflix. I was just every end of the chapter, I had to know what happened next. It was just like brilliantly done. And then there was a moment in the book that, it was so like visceral, so scary. I like slammed the book shut and put it aside for a minute because like my heart was racing. I really did feel like I had just watched it as a movie almost of like, I think how much enjoyment you get from reading does depend on how vivid your imagination is. Because for me, it's like I'm reading these pages and I am so fucking scared of this lady that I get to a certain point. I just slam the book shut. I set it aside. I had to just like calm down for a couple minutes before I went back to it because that was just how real it felt in that moment. And it's why I feel like I get real enjoyment out of reading horror stories much more than I get from movies. And I think just your own imagination plays a part in that for sure. But man, like when you tell them like books as entertainment, it's like, oh man, I was hooked. I was hooked. It was the same as when I read The Stand, which I had to take a break from The Stand only because it was so stressful.
I love The Stand.
That book. Once I was done with it and had the whole story in my head, I was like, that was incredible. But in the moment, and largely just living in the post-COVID world, it was so stressful. It brought me, not that COVID was that serious, of course, as a super flu that killed, 99% of the population, but just the fact of the suspense created by, oh, this guy started coughing. And it just reminded me of 2020 when we didn't know how serious this was going to be. And it did really freak me out to hear someone coughing in a grocery store. And I'm like, take cover. He's trying to kill us. Like, because we didn't know. And so that book stressed me out majorly.
Well, to combine our topics, I actually started reading The Stand again in March of 2020 because I just love that much thematic combination. And I was like, that's what this feels like. March 2020 feels like Captain Trips, feels like The Stand. Let's read The Stand. And I remember how surreal the opening of that book felt in March of 2020. So
that's absolute mad lad behavior because it was like I started that book. I started it in 2023. I did put it away for a bit to read other things just because it was tripping me out. Like it was so it made me feel anxious the way that Colin enjoys feeling anxious by entertainment. I don't. I like the brief anxiety of books like Misery. All right. It's just short book. The scenes that are really anxiety inducing are brief. And then, Stephen King kind of gives you a little bit of reprieve. The Stand was just so stressful. It was just so stressful. It took me a while to get through it. And then once I kind of really said, okay, I'm going to commit to this, I mean, the story just takes off and I was away with it. But yeah, I am someone who is just always looking for the next book, which is why I struggle a bit with longer books because I'm like, I just want to read as many as possible. I love books so much. But I have part of my goal for classics. I want to read The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a very long book. Not a classic, but I want to read
cards ready. Yeah, my wife just read The Count of Monte Cristo this past year because my daughter was reading it in school. So yeah, she loved it, but she did have a series of note cards with everybody's French name.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, that was the thing with Jane Eyre. There's so much French in that book. A lot of French in Jane Austen as well, not quite as much. And I'm constantly using the translate feature either on my phone or on my Kindle, depending on whether I'm using a paper book or the Kindle. And I'm just like, why are these British people speaking so much French? Like, man, just speak English. All right. You're in Britain. Stop it. But yeah, longer books are a challenge for me only because I start to get antsy to read something different. But It by Stephen King is a book I'm really excited to read. I'm terrified of it. I've been terrified of the movie cover since I was a child, the miniseries starring, is it Tim Curry?
It is. It's Tim Curry. And I get that. I don't think is going to scare you as much as an adult as it might have before.
I hope not.
I really
but
like
it's my
Stephen
dad's
King.
Well, that's the thing. So I got into Stephen King. He's one of my dad's favorite authors. I really got into it because I wanted to bond with my dad over it. And it is one of his favorites. And I said, I have to read it. I really want to be able to talk to dad about this. But literally just having the book on my shelf freaks me out. And actually, when I got the copy in the mail from Amazon, I ordered a new copy. She looked brand new. She's wrapped in plastic. I open it and there's an Amazon gift tag inside. And it says like, Merry Christmas, Timmy, love Aunt, whatever. And it creeped me out so bad to be like, I ordered this new, it looks new, an Amazon gift note falls out of it. I was like, the book's haunted. I don't like it. But yeah, reading is definitely a passion of mine. It's something I regrettably gave up for several years when I was in a relationship with someone who just actively discouraged me reading to the point of I did just stop reading for a while. And it was something that once I had it back, I felt like myself again. Once I had a book in my hand, pretty much everywhere I went, I felt like Micah again. Because it was always a huge part of my life. My dad and my grandma both loved to read. And having that back was like, oh, now I'm back. Now it feels like I really am kind of whole again in some weird way.
No, that's good. I can't imagine discouraging reading. So I'm glad to hear it.
So it is. It's hugely important to me. And I love having my collection of books and all that.
Stephen King wrote one of my favorite books about writing. I don't know if you've read his On Writing book.
Yes.
But it is one that I recommend to everybody that's interested in storytelling in general and plot momentum and characterization. He does a really good job of talking about his process and how he writes his stories. And I'm not saying that as Stephen King is the best writer to have ever lived. I think he's a very good novelist and selling his book ideas and hooks and stories and things like that. But On Writing is like the best textbook that doesn't read as a textbook for how to tell stories that I can recommend.
Oh yeah, it is excellent. I have read it. It's a really cool memoir of his life, as well as like a primer on writing. And it was, that's the name of the book. But also reading Misery recently and seeing how much of that he put in there as well. Of, Misery, the story being that this author is essentially being held hostage. That's not a spoiler. It's just the basic premise. But Stephen King puts so much of the writing process into the novel. He puts so much of it into being like how this guy has to, still write through this whole process he's going through. And it is like, just reading that in itself is like a primer for writing stories. There's this really cool moment in the book just where the guy sort of mentions part of his process is just saying, can you? He's like, he comes up with an idea and then he's like, can you do it? And where the story goes from there. And it genuinely is part of how I wrote the mini D&D campaign that we did for Constellation. Was in my head, it's like, okay, the travelers they need to find the healer. It's like, can you? It's like, what do they have to do to actually get there? It genuinely helped rewrite that. And that's just one of his novels. It's not supposed to be a textbook about writing, but he threw in so much about the process that's another one I'd recommend for anyone who's interested in storytelling. Of like, man, this is just a really great story, and it just so happens that he threw in all this extra know-how in it. Now, Stephen King has quickly become a favorite of mine. Like, my all-time favorite author is still Amy Tan. And then finding out that her and Stephen King were friends, and I'm like, oh, well, that's fantastic, because I like them both so much. He's quickly become a favorite. My favorite book of his so far is Salem's Lot, of the ones that I've read. That one's just scintillating. I couldn't get enough of that.
It's not a hot take. I think The Stand is my favorite. I'm sorry, Colin.
No, it's okay.
What?
No, please.
Oh, I was just saying The Stand is my favorite Stephen King.
I'm sorry, I was writing a note. So I was introduced to Stephen King's writing with Night Shift, which I had to read in one of my high school classes. And that's how I fell in love with Children of the Corn, which is my favorite. I just love, I've said it a million times, like anything combining religion and children and horror. It's just like inherently very scary. I love that. And I love the movie. Like, fucking love the movie. And then I had only read one other Stephen King book in my entire life, which was all the way through. Actually, I read Gerald's Game, I guess, and a couple other things, but I read
my parents bought me Gerald's Game, which is not what you would think. It's not what I'm trying to remember. Like those years is like, what was my mom thinking? I don't know. It's
because it doesn't sound very intimidating, and but like all of his things there, it's horrifying. But it's funny. I read The Stand. And I read it probably 2011 or 2012 or whatever. And I read it during my very brief Kindle era. And that gets me into some questions I wanted to ask you guys as we wrap up here. I realized I had a couple of things I wanted to bring up. And then I was like, oh, these are kind of either or questions. But I'll get to those. Very similar to what Mike was bringing up earlier, but about our preferences with writing. But I thought I would ask, like, what are some of your all-time... let's start with you. What are some of your all-time favorite books?
Well, I mentioned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Right.
I think that's probably number one. Other books that I have enjoyed, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings are ones that I have on my shelves that I really kind of respect more than enjoy for pleasure specifically. What else do I like? I really like Neil Stephenson. If there was a book I could recommend, I really like one that he wrote that I don't think got a lot of press or praise, called Seven Eves, which its basic premise is that something's wrong with the moon and it may or may not crash to Earth. And a bunch of characters in a kind of sprawling epic have to deal with what that would mean and how to survive it and what it means for the future of mankind if it does happen. So there's a lot in that particular novel that I had actually long wanted to see as a mini series, but that's one of my favorites. And it's all one word. It's the Seven and Eves all together. But I couldn't recommend that one more. If you like that style of writing, Neil Stephenson has done a lot of stuff that's really interesting about codes and ciphers. In a series of books he calls, I think, the Baroque trilogy. And he, if you're not familiar with the name at all, I think was most famous for a book he wrote called Snow Crash, which really kind of predicted some of the internet slang and the way we treat kind of modern culture, not quite cyberpunky, but also a little bit cyberpunky. And that's a book that is very kind of impactful and meaningful to a lot of people that think about these things. But I think that's probably the set of my favorites. I also really like historical fiction. So I like Pillars of Earth, and that author whose name is escaping me right now.
I'll look it up for you.
Is that Ken Follett?
It is Ken Follett. And
very good.
I like, he did one about World War I called, I think, like the Fall of Giants. That he just does a really good job of taking essentially historical through lines and giving them to a character and having those characters interact. So World War I think, is a particularly good place for him because he does a really good job establishing of the kind of nested treatises and alliances that resulted in World War I in that series. So I like those as well. And I think that's about everything that I'm willing to endorse here on this program.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this when you were talking, and also when Micah was talking earlier about some of the classics she was reading, where there's just such a breadth of books that I couldn't imagine. Like, you want to read the classics, for instance, you were saying, Mike, like I couldn't imagine being totally caught up on all of it. Like, you have to kind of just really pick and choose. Very similar to games, not so much, because I feel like I feel like there's just so many more good books actually than there are games worth your time, especially over time. You know, games are still new. Give it a few hundred years, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of competition there. Micah, where are you on this? Favorite books, favorite authors, anything to recommend for people?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and when you mention like approaching classics, for example, I did consult just a lot of lists on forums like Goodreads, and of course like the books subreddit of just give me 20 books that you think everyone should read type deal. Because the reality is that it's endless. One person had actually taken, they're like, here's my whole list of books I want to read. I calculated the averages based on, like on Google and Amazon, what the Kindle average read times are. And it's going to take me 5 years to get through all these books if I can read. And it was for like 2 hours a day.
That's so crazy.
And then the person updated it later because they had like 20 more books added. And they're like, all right, I'm looking now at like 8 years. And that was where it's like too far for me of, yeah, I wanted to experience some of these classics because they're completely new to me, but I am certainly choosing ones that interest me, like The Count of Monte Cristo, because I loved the movie when I was younger. Anna Karenina by Tolstoy is one that it's a big goal because it's a kind of challenging book, but the story really intrigues me. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting into Jane Eyre and like the Sense and Sensibility, Jane Austen novels. Like, they have been fun. It's been genuinely fun to sort of get into, as someone who loves Downton Abbey, it's been cool to get into the Britishisms, right? But yeah, if we're talking about some of my favorites, they're really varied. Like, one of my all-time favorite books is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I do love sci-fi. I don't pick it up as often these days. My recent Micah has been very interested in horror and fantasy. And I've been kind of going between those interchangeably and not really going back to sci-fi in quite some time because I got super into the Witcher novels by Andrzej Sapkowski. I then read his other trilogy, The Tower of Fools, which was excellent. And so I got really into fantasy for a while. I read through the Lord of the Rings books for the first time. I read through The Hobbit for the first time after it scared me as a child and I couldn't finish it.
Giant spiders is acceptable.
No, the giant spider is where I was like, oh God, like this, everything's scary. We had the trolls and everything. And I was my mom had to write a note to my teacher that I didn't have to finish the book because I was just getting so scared of all these various things. as an adult, it wasn't scary at all. But so I do kind of sort of vacillate between genres. And right now, I'm very much into the either fantasy or horror or these British classics. And so, favorites that come to mind, I love Amy Tan. She is a master of writing stories about the relationships between mothers and daughters. Often they're challenging, they're very real. And so, she was one of my favorite authors when I was a child because she also wrote some kids' books. And she also had a children's show on PBS called Sagwa, the Chinese Siamese cat, that I loved. And so I got into her books in high school. The Joy Luck Club is a very famous one. They did a movie of that as well. The Kitchen God's Wife is another. I just love all her books. I think they're fantastic. Definitely a little more girly, but I think they're excellent. Favorites from Stephen King would be Salem's Lot, like I mentioned. Also Pet Sematary. I've loved everything I've read of his so far, but Pet Sematary really stands out because it's much more a book about grief than anything. Like, you set aside the scary overtones. This is a book about just profound grief and just how humans will do almost anything to avoid uncomfortable feelings. And it's just like a really excellent character study of the ones in the book of like what you're willing to do to avoid dealing with things that you find unpleasant, basically. Yeah, those three really jump out at me for authors. I'm just trying to think of like, yeah, I mean, the Lord of the Rings trilogy moved me, even knowing the stories already. It still moved me to tears with certain scenes, just the way that they're written. Tolkien could have taken out a couple songs and poems. I'm gonna knock him a star for that. He could have removed like 3 poems, but yeah, those ones really jump out at me as favorite authors in recent memory, at least, and ones that I continually go back to. Actually, one of my all-time favorite books is Memoirs of a Geisha, which I read when I was in high school. I got in trouble with my mom for reading it, but I adored that book, and that is what kicked off my love of learning about Japanese culture. It was really that book at the time. I had no clue at all about anything in Japan, didn't know what a geisha was, and I read that book, which is not the most accurate book, I know, but it kicked off that love of learning about Japan. And I also, from there, started reading all sorts of historical fiction set in China, as well as South Korea. I adore books set in those countries. The descriptions of food, clothing, customs, like especially, in those times, I just loved all of it. And so that book started for me a very early love of getting into anime and things like that later on, getting into like Japanese games later on. Like, my interest in this really all started with Memoirs of a Geisha and just absolutely adoring the descriptions of the kimono, the tea ceremonies, everything. That world that he created just had me totally enthralled. And from there on, I have just loved all things set in Japan, especially books and all that. So that'd be another one that would be very like fundamental to my like what I like to read today.
Yeah, this is good. These are good answers. I've been writing down some things too, as you guys have been talking about some things I want to check out that you've been bringing up. I have a few here in my notes that I thought would be like, and I want to talk about this in a little while because we've not talked about nonfiction reading at all. And nonfiction reading is a massive part of what I've read and what I enjoy reading. These last few years, I've tried to be very, very intentional about reading more fiction, like way more fiction, because I just typically read history or philosophy or science. Like, I love pop science and, the big and small history books. Like, I'll read whatever, John Mearsheimer releases or something like that. But, you also read some of the deeper histories and all that. So I've really tried to get away from that because it is very thick reading. When I founded Colin's Last Stand, like the History Channel, I was reading shit ton of books at that point and needed to get away from them a little bit. So here's some fiction that I enjoy is, so I think that he died recently. And I brought up, hold on, I close it here. I brought up, Cormac McCarthy's bibliography, because I've read most of it now, but I feel like much of it, probably about half of it actually now. And he was probably, he died recently, but he was probably one of the greatest, more recent living writers that I really love. And The Road is probably pound for pound my favorite book. I really, really enjoy The Road a lot. But I really like No Country for Old Men too. What'd you say? Oh.
That explains some of your love of Last of Us.
Oh, right? Certainly.
That's a very road-inspired story.
Oh no, I mean completely. And Dagan and I did No Country for Old Men and Blood Meridian on Knockback, and those were good too. I found Blood Meridian to be very, very difficult. Probably the most difficult book I've actually ever read in terms of understanding what's going on in it. And Cormac McCarthy was always fascinating to me because he just doesn't follow the rules of grammar. In terms of the way he writes, like, and he doesn't use punctuation and like properly, no quotations, no real chapter relief, and it's like very weird. And I had to, for reading Blood Meridian, I had to go to like a Cliff's Notes website, and like after every chapter I'd like go read it, because I'm like, I'm not entirely sure I even understood what the fuck just happened. It was that complicated for me, and I didn't feel so stupid because a lot of people wrote in being like, yeah, it is a very tough book to read. And you can tell why it wasn't the most popular thing. I mean, people liked it, but it became more popular later when he started reading things that people enjoyed even more. A really important series to me as a kid, like a young adult series, was Brian Jacques' Redwall series. Really huge.
The mice.
Yeah, the mice, right. I'm a really huge fan of Redwall. I think Redwall is really, really special. And there's a bunch of them that I haven't read, but like the original ones, like it was like Madame Mayo, Mossflower, Mariel Redwall, like a few of them, like, and Redwall's the original one. They're really great. If you have young kids out there that are in like maybe 12, 13, something like that, really, really cool young adult books to read. I wanted to recommend those. I was
trying to convince my daughter to read Redwall because she likes cute little things and she likes fantasy. But I don't want to interrupt your list, Colin, but I just in my head was thinking that while I was trying to get her to read Redwall, she was pushing a book series that she adores that's apparently becoming a movie pretty soon called The Wild Robot, which is about a robot that like makes friends with forest animals. But she loves it. So if you want to take the endorsement of a preteen, early teenage Hogue family member, The Wild Robot, highly recommended.
Right on. Yeah, and I haven't heard of that one. What I've learned about children's literature is there's just so fucking much of it. When I go into a Borders, or not Borders anymore, Borders is gone, like a Barnes and Noble or whatever, it's like, what is all of this shit? It's crazy. I don't even know any of this stuff. So yeah, what I was saying was Orwell, I love. Animal Farm was an incredibly poignant book for me to read in my political kind of foundation as a kid and in high school. And I absolutely, Animal Farm is so fucking good, and it's really short, and you should definitely read it. It's amazing. But also like 1984. I mean, you want to read all the good Orwell as well. Catch-22 by Joseph Heller was a really powerful book for me to read as a younger person.
And it's zippy. That one's fun to read.
Yeah, it is. And it's about like the death cult of American pilots basically in World War II, about how they're stuck in the Catch-22, which is you have to like reach a certain amount of flights to get out and like live, and then the number keeps like going up, and what people are asking of you keeps changing, and it's the Catch-22, and that's where the term comes from. And it's a really, really powerful book, and it's very fucking funny, like very funny, because it's incredibly dark. It's about like the inevitability of like how these guys feel like they're gonna die. Yossarian is the main character, the pilot. Then really, really highly recommend that. I love Ray Bradbury. Fahrenheit 451 is fucking iconic sci-fi, subversive and strange and scary, and but all of his stuff is good. Wonderful short stories. Can't remember the one short story book about where there's a story about these aliens that only communicate with kids. It's very creepy, and like how the kids are stealing things from their parents that seem incidental, like they're playing, but they're like getting things for the aliens that they need to like melt down the metals and like do all these kinds of things. Really fucking sick. Kurt Vonnegut, I love. Sirens of Titan was another formative book for me in high school. But Slaughterhouse-Five is also highly recommended. People love Breakfast of Champions. And I mean, there's a bunch of shit he wrote. And yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to nonfiction, not necessarily anything specific, but just that I read mostly nonfiction until recently. When I was a kid, I read a lot of fiction. And more recently, I've read a lot of fiction. But really, I was reading a lot of nonfiction in between. And that comes from being a history guy and a history major in school, and just the sheer amount of reading you have to do. There's no time for fucking fiction when you're in the weeds with that stuff. And I do really love reading that stuff too. And I love reading philosophy as well. Like reading Henry David Thoreau was like in college was like a very powerful thing for me. And Emerson. I love the Transcendentalists. And so I highly recommend, if you want to read fiction, that's cool, but expand your mind to some of this other stuff too that can really be useful to read. But I have 4 questions I wanted to ask you guys as we wrap things up. And we can linger if you want. Digital or physical reading? So and I'll answer first for all these, I guess, just to kind of kick it off to you guys, is I did go in, when I got my iPad, I only had one iPad ever, an iPad 2. I got it in 2011. And I downloaded the Kindle app. And for probably a year and a half, I was reading all my books on Kindle. And I did like the accessibility. I'm like, oh, I just want to read this. And then I would just download it. And that was cool. But I like physical books. And I realized that it was one of those things that seem, and I think the book industry will say this, people I know in the book industry will say this. When I was working on a book that never came to fruition with HarperCollins, the guy that I was working with, the editor there, would say this, is like, books have been somewhat resilient. Like physical books are still an important component. It's not like CDs or even video games. Most people do want to read physically still. And that it didn't quite take off the way that they thought it would. There's something very tactile about it. So I never want to read a digital book ever again, and haven't in many years. So I read all physical books personally. Micah, I know you mix between the two. So what's your preference?
Yeah, and I bought you a Kindle that I am going to take back because mine's dying, and I'm going to commandeer the Kindle.
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it.
You just said you never want to use it. No, so I'm
not just presenting this with you today, but yes, God, I'm sorry.
No, I do love physical books. I use the Kindle though for library books. Our local library uses Libby, which is an app you can get on your phone to browse their catalog of ebooks, send them to your Kindle, because I read a lot, and I don't want to buy every single book. I do enjoy participating in our local library program, but without having to drive there, get the books, and deal with all of that. I'm also just going to say it. I've gotten some gross books. I've gotten books full of crumbs. I've gotten books that were sticky. I am sick of library books, but I do want to participate in free books. So that has been key to me reading more. It got me to read more because I fully admit that the pandemic and living alone gave me a screen addiction, because I lived alone in a studio apartment. I wouldn't see people for a week at a time. All my friends existed in this little rectangle of my phone, and it completely made this dependence on screens, because in a very panicked time, that was the only way I could talk to anyone. So the Kindle, you kind of nurtured the screen addiction, but you're reading, and it's the Kindle Paperwhite, so it doesn't make it so I can't sleep at night. And it was perfect. And it really did kind of wean me off my phone, because I'm still holding the bright glowing orb that my crow brain loves so much, but I'm reading a book. And then 2, participating in getting free books and being able to read more because of that, because I'm not contemplating, do I want to buy this book for $14.99? I don't know if I'll like it. And being able to say instead, okay, yeah, I'm going to rent it from the library. I'm back to using the library like I did when I was a kid. The books aren't gross and full of crumbs, and I don't have to drive there and get the books and bring them back. So the Kindle, mostly for me, is for the library services. And then I do still order books. I hate reading a long book on Kindle. There's no way I could read something like The Stand, 1,000 pages, or The Count of Monte Cristo, 1,000 pages on a Kindle. I need the tactile, being able to turn the page, see my progress with a bookmark and not just a percentage. Like any book that is longer than 500 pages, I need it to be a real book, because otherwise it feels like it's never ending on Kindle, and it just doesn't feel the same. But I agree. I do love physical books, But for the volume of reading that I do, Kindle is now essential, because the reality is that if I purchased every single book that I've read so far this year, I mean, it would be hundreds of dollars already, versus being able to get them from the library so easily, and then buying the books I really care about. I rented Jane Eyre from the library. I loved it so much that I went and bought it, because I'm like, I'm going to read that again in the future for sure. This is a book I want in print. But otherwise, there are books that I read that I hated. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't buy that. Happy to give the library their numbers so that, prove people still use it. But good Lord, I'm glad I didn't buy that thing. So that's really where I'm at, is using the Kindle as much as I can to get free books. And sometimes Amazon will have really great deals. I got the entire Jane Austen novel set for 49 cents on Kindle. They had all her books. And I had read 2 of them from the library. And I said, well, I'm really enjoying these. I might as well pay 50 cents to have the whole collection on Kindle. Now I don't have a time limit. I don't have to read it in 2 weeks and give it back. That was a no-brainer. So sometimes Kindle books are just so cheap that I'm happy to do it that way as well. Simply because, while I do want to buy physical books that I really love, I'm also not trying to throw money away on my reading habits. I do want to be smart about it. So when Amazon is a deal like that, 50 cents to get 6 books, that's just easy peasy. I'll definitely do that.
Where are you on this, Hogue? Are you a physical reader or a digital reader?
Well, I'm a better living through technology kind of guy, right? Video games and everything else. So I got a Kindle when they first came out. I didn't love that original iteration of Kindle. I didn't like how the buttons worked. I didn't like how the screen looked. But a couple of years back, I asked for a Paperwhite, and I really like the technology now. And I really like, kind of conceptually in my head, the notion of having a library that can just slip into my laptop case is just really cool to me. And I like that. But I will say I have more success finishing books when they are physical, when it's a book by itself. And my family loves to go to the bookstore. That's a Hogue family weekend trip, is we go out to the Noodles & Co., which my daughter loves, and we go to the Barnes & Noble, and we pick up the latest John Green book. My daughter loves Paper Towns and Turtles All the Way Down and An Abundance of Catherines and every other John Green book I'm probably forgetting already.
I'm looking them up.
And my rule at the Barnes & Noble is basically, because I do have the Kindle and I do enjoy using it, that's what I took on vacation, that I will get books if they are cool editions. If they maybe have a box that they go in, if they have a fancy bookmark that they come with, I will get books that are artifacts in and of themselves to have as a physical object. But for the most part, I'm buying my books on my Kindle and trying to finish them there. But I agree entirely with Micah that when it says, we estimate 13 hours left, you're on page 6 of 2030, it's hard. It's harder than kind of feeling the physical progress you're making in a book as the pages go to the left hand from the right. But I also think that the Kindle is really good at organizing series. So I do love some book series that have a lot of entries in them. The Expanse is the one that comes to mind first. I really love the Expanse series of books. And the Kindle does a good job of making sure that all 9 books are together and you can get access to them in a way that my library bookshelves maybe aren't. When you're looking for book 3 and you don't remember what it's called, because of course they're not just called Expanse 3. And the Kindle's better at that. So I think there's pros and cons, as you would expect. But I do agree that I seem to have more success reading consistently and finishing a book when it's physically in front of me.
It's funny, man. It's funny to hear you guys talk about this, because I think that was the one example of me kind of backtracking off of a technological advancement and being meh. I love streaming music, for instance. I think it's so superior to buying albums and doing all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's kind of, you guys were touching on this because the second thing I wanted to ask you was purchasing books or going to the library. Now, I love libraries. I think it's amazing that libraries exist, free libraries, membership libraries back in the long time ago. But, my sister Dana worked in Brookhaven Free Library, our town library, and I was there with her all the time, and I loved it. And South Country Library and Dover Library in New Hampshire when I lived up there, and Snell Library at Northeastern, and all the rest. I love these free depository or these accessible depositories of books. I think it's super awesome. But I also, it's similar to how I feel about games where, and I understand people don't want to do this. It's not important to them, or they certainly don't have the money to do it, but I just want to show my support for the books. So it's important for me to buy them. And I've kind of always felt that way. I've always really been a buyer of books. I haven't been a member of a library since I was in college. So, and I've read, probably a couple hundred books since then, at least. And they're all on my shelf. And so I try to just put my money where my mouth is just because I can do that. But obviously as a young kid and a teenager and stuff, I was always at the library and I would buy some books. I actually was a member of a Columbia House-like book thing for sci-fi and fantasy books and very similar to Columbia House, never paid. So like as the joke goes, and older people will remember, but, and Hogue, you probably remember the Columbia House stuff. You like get 12 CDs for a penny or whatever. And then you'd have to buy.
I mean, I think they were audio cassette tapes when I was a kid with the Columbia House.
Right, exactly.
Yes, music.
And I did that like 4 times probably with different companies and never bought any CDs and never paid for anything. So I have like I probably had like 50 albums when I was a kid. I was total thievery. And
every time I come on here, it's a series of Colin schemes from his youth.
It's amazing like how easy it was to get away with it. Like there was no danger, it seemed like, in doing it at all, because I was like 12, and I must admit I did the same thing a couple times with this, or actually really once with this book, this sci-fi and fantasy book thing, and got a few books. Like that's how I got Starship Troopers, the Heinlein book, which I really like, and a few other things. But really, since in college, I spent thousands of dollars on books. And then after that, I've spent thousands of dollars on books, no doubt, just to kind of show support. But I understand that that's not important. Some people can't afford it. Accessibility. I don't give a fuck what you do. It's totally fine. But for me, like my own personal approach is to buy the books. So I have no interest in going to libraries. But I know that they're really important to you guys. And you had brought them up already, or Micah specifically talked about going and getting the library, the digital books, which is cool. I don't really understand how that all works. Like I'd love to know about the finances behind it.
Oh yeah.
Like how is the author compensated? As I understand it, I think it's under contracts by time, right? Or whatever.
Right. So, well, generally speaking, how some of them work is, let's say the ebook is rented 50 times. The library pays a fee for those 50 reads. The next 50 times it's read, they'll pay the fee again. That's how some of them are set up. So it's based off of how many times the book is checked out. And that's how some of these libraries work with Libby. It really varies though. And especially when you think of like some of these classics that it's like, well, this ebook on Amazon is literally 10 cents. It's like, what's the library paying for this, right? Like, but I like to buy books. I simply could not afford to buy all the books that I do read though in a year. Like the difference between like, you Colin, maybe reading a trilogy or 2 per year and me reading a different book every 2 weeks or so. It's like, I just don't have the money for this. And I also admit I sometimes pick books and just don't like them. And so like you're much more choosy with your books because you're maybe going to read 2 trilogies a year. I am going on the library site and saying, oh, this looks decent. We'll try it out. But if I had bought that book for $15 on Amazon, I'd be pissed. Yeah, that'd be a bummer. Because I'd be like, this book isn't very good. I do like to though go back later and buy the ones I really liked if I think I'm going to reread it later, But it is, the library for me is just about affordability of, there's no way I would read as much as I do if I had to buy every single book up front. And especially at ebook prices. I mean, sometimes the paperbacks are cheaper than the ebooks. Then I go for paperback for sure. But sometimes you look at ebook prices, it's like they want $18.99 for a digital book. And it's like, there's no way I'm paying for that. Yeah. There's no way I'm paying for that. Crazy. I'm only buying ebooks if they're cheaper than a physical copy.
I guess this kind of leads into the next. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We didn't hear from Hogue yet on this.
We did not.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to back your position, Colin, that said, in my brain, the way I'm wired is that I want to support things that I like, right? But to me, the thing I use the most for my entertainment is video games. So that's the one where I'm buying indie games, and I'm basically buying things on a kind of lark that looks interesting kind of basis and saying, hey, you know what? It's gonna help support this, whether I like it or not, and I feel okay about that. Books I don't read as much, as I play, so it's not that same kind of calculus. But I do want to back up the Libby stuff because my daughters are like deeply, deeply into things like mythology and understanding countries and cultures and backgrounds that are not maybe the things that you want to buy as books. You don't need to stock your library with like the various educational books about Sri Lanka and things like that. But through the Libby system, you can get those digitally pretty easily. And so we've been able to have our kids get basically whatever information, educational or fiction that they want. So we've been like this last year, they really were interested in the mythology of Japan. And so they went through those books through the library system rather than having to go and try to buy separate educational textbooks for everything that they might wind up liking. And we want to encourage that kind of desire to know and desire to learn. But the library system makes that a lot more accessible than having to go and buy everything.
Yeah, it's and I think it's great. Like, books are too important to be held back from people, in my opinion. Like, it's important that we have access to them and that people of any income level can. It's not the way I feel about games or TV or movie, by the way. Like, books are somewhat unique and in that sense. And so I think the accessibility is important. But yeah, I always tell people to put their money where their mouth is. And like, it would be, and so this is a place for me to do that. And this, like you said, the same thing with games. I don't have a problem with people renting games or using the subscription services, but I want to put my money where my mouth is. Like, I know that my participation is valuable in keeping things going, just in its own small way. You know, I wanted to ask you guys. I guess this would be a physical game book thing only, but hardcover or softcover books, what you prefer? I mean, I'm a huge fan of softcover books. Hardcover books are always the first run, or typically the first run of a book. And if I'm really interested in a book, then I will get that, but it's somewhat rare. They're usually more expensive. Sometimes they're really fucking expensive. And then when the soft cover comes out, it 6 months or a year later, it's more affordable, more accessible. I like bending my books up. I treat them pretty well, but like, I crease them a little bit, and like they're
Micah seems to disagree.
Your books are fucking destroyed. Oh my God. Every book Colin reads, they're wrecked. When you were like, I think I might read Misery, and in my head I'm like, I'm gonna buy another one.
Oh no, I'll buy my own copy of Misery then.
Because it just is. It's
I
like,
don't want to be.
I've seen your books by the end.
I try not to be like. I don't think I'm that destructive with them, but I bend them and look. It's like they'll crease. It's like it's a book. What am I supposed to fucking like open it like it's a valuable comic and like hold it like this?
No, but you don't have to. You don't have to take it like Batman over Bane's knee. Okay, like the difference between how I read my books, like, you can tell it's been read. Yes, the spine has a slight crease. I've watched you read. You just like, you open her up like a Subway sandwich. You're mashing down the buns to get the toppings on. It's a very different way than how I read, because like I do treat my books a bit gingerly. I do. And that comes from my dad. One time I threw a book at my sister, and she was like, oh my God. She's like, Dad, Micah threw a book at me. He's like, don't hurt the books. And then she was like, Dad. And he was like, oh, right, sorry. But it's like, he didn't give a fuck about her in that moment. It was like, don't hurt my books. Like, what are you doing to my books over here? Like, put that back. Like, so it's probably where I get it from.
Are you, Micah, hardcover or softcover? What do you prefer?
I love hardcover books for the look of them. Like, I bought Andrei Sapkowski, the Tower of Fools trilogy. Gorgeous hardcover books, really beautiful, like drawings on the covers. But it's murder to read them, because there's something wrong with my hands. I don't know what it is. But like, my hands I deal with sometimes intermittent weakness in my hands and wrists. And so hardcover books are becoming a challenge, because just even holding one for like an hour is just like killing my hands. So I do buy a lot more paperbacks, partly because of the cost. Like the Witcher books, for example, I'm looking at my shelf. I think there's 8 of them. 8, hardcovers, that's a lot of money. So the paperbacks, way cheaper to get it that way. And, my Stephen King books, as I'm adding to that collection, I wish I could afford all the hardcovers, but what I want is the vintage ones. My dad had this really sweet Stephen King hardcover collection. He had sold most of them over the years. He did send me one that he still had, but it's like, what I picture in my head is not the ones they make anymore. The covers that I wanted from when I was a kid aren't in production these days. They're $60 to $80 on eBay. So I'm primarily buying paperbacks. I do have a dream of there's a specific edition of Salem's Lot that I really want the hardcover for, and someday I'm just going to pull the trigger on eBay and buy it. But yeah, paperbacks usually, because the hardcover books, whatever's wrong with my hands, it's not jiving well with that. And also for travel, for bringing books with me on the go, the paperbacks are definitely much more easy to transport.
Yeah, shoving it in the bag is definitely a paperback kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or feeling like if this did get damaged, I can replace this for $12.99 versus the $35 maybe I paid for a hardcover book.
Where are you
Yeah,
on
and
this?
for me, it's kind of the same thing that I was talking about before with the Barnes and Noble trips, which is like books as artifacts. I want the hardcover with like the built-in bookmark and the illuminated box that you put the book in. Like I want all that stuff. That's what I want from a hardcover purchase. But for like accomplishing the read, making sure I get it done, stuffing it in the bag to go on vacation, whatever it is, it's going to be a paperback that I maybe don't take the best care out of. Although in your prior conversation, I realized I had some kind of small OCD because I thought of the number of times that I had like crease the corners of a paperback page the wrong direction as you close it, right? And it gets locked that way when it closes that way for a couple hours or a day. And I hate that. I hate bent corners of books. And I feel bad about it when it happens. So I apologize to all book lovers that I have done that to my paperbacks in the past. But yeah, I think in general, paperbacks is the real answer to when I want to get something read. But hardcovers are what I wind up buying more because when I buy books, I'm mostly looking for something that looks nice on the shelf.
Interesting.
And you mentioned too, Rick, actually, when it comes to travel, Kindle for me is the king of travel. My dad will go on vacation and bring 6 books with him from the library, which is cool. But I'm like, but I have them all and they fit right in my purse. Right. In terms of packing a bag to travel, it is madness to bring 6 physical books with you for your trip. It's like, no, because the other thing too is if you finish all those books, you're out of books. With the Kindle, I can download several, get all my books from the library, and there's no running out. There's no, I finished my book and I still have 3 days of vacation. It's just get another one. Either buy another one or rent another one. Yeah.
It feels like you have a full library, and that's the cool part about technology. Absolutely.
Exactly. Like travel for me, Kindle is an essential part of travel now, flying especially. I might want to bring a physical book that I'm currently reading, but the Kindle's coming along for whenever I finish that book, because then I can read whatever I want.
Right on. Yeah, this was a fun conversation. I'm glad that I know we all share the love of reading, which is cool. But I understand that some people just don't have the disposition for it, don't have the time. It requires a specific amount of focus. Everyone's been there where I'm like, I read 2 pages, and I'm like, I have no idea what I just read, and I have to go back and read it again. It happens more often than I'd like to admit, probably, where I have to go and reread something. You have to be in like the very specific state of mind. So I get that it's not for everyone, but I hope that people continue to explore the written word best they can, and support it where you can. I think it's vital. Writers are underrated. Writing is an underrated art. It's an underrated skill.
I love writing. I believe fully in storytelling, and that exists at all levels, right? The start of a video game, the start of a movie, the start of a television show, certainly the start of a book, obviously, is somebody sitting down and writing something out. And so I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry for jumping.
And it's hard. It's really hard. Like I just think writing's one of those things that I think everyone or many people think they can do. And just because you can read and write doesn't mean you can really write. And shit, I'm learning that every day when I'm working on our various games. It's like, I'm not very good at this. Like a lot of other people make this look so much easier than it is,
One of my favorite parts about that On Writing book from Stephen King that I was talking about earlier is he dispels the notion that like it's just talent and gift that makes novels pop out, right? That Stephen King, one of the most voluminous writers in modern times, talks about how difficult it is to get 1,000 pages done, right? To get what he's getting done on any given day and focusing on that and just making it a very reachable goal. And I like that as both a writing kind of rubric, but also a life lesson kind of thing, which is that it's easy enough to go look at what somebody else does and see the output and success after it's happened and say they're talented, they're gifted, they got that done. But the actual process on the ground of writing a novel or writing a script or anything else that you really respect out of what you're seeing on the internet or elsewhere is more difficult than it looks. And like part of the game, part of the talent is the will and wherewithal to stick with it when it hurts and it's hard. And that's everybody, right? Whoever you respect online and you love their YouTube channel or you love their commentary, like there's grit and determination and perseverance that went into that process that maybe you don't see when you're just looking at the output.
Yeah. It's well said. We'll leave it there. Let's say goodbye. Go around. 3 topics done in the can. Oh, goodbye to you.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Have a good weekend. Be well. What's on your agenda?
Absolutely. This weekend, it's recovery from vacation, right? Not to sound like a coffee mug, but I need a vacation from my vacation. Right. So we're getting things settled back into the normal routines.
Right on. That sounds great. And Micah, goodbye to you. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you right after this since we live together. Dinner tonight, to the hotel tomorrow for more dinner. So a few things coming up, some games and so on and so forth. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a fun weekend, and a huge thank you to Hogue because you really saved the day in the end of this, because it would have just been the two of us had Hogue not been available. I don't know what we would have done. So this was not only a fun conversation to have Hogue on for, but he really saved our bacon today. Yeah. So big thank you, because it's just one of those things of, as soon as I was like, okay, we need a 4th seat, and Colin's like, email Rick, and it's like, I'm emailing Rick and I'm feeling real good about it. And it turned out fantastic.
Oh, so well, I'm glad. Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Yeah, we're trying to get you more and more involved if we can. We're setting something up for Pentiment, and I had messaged you about that, and that's you were on, and you weren't able to do that, but you were on my mind. So I'm good. Yeah, thank you for coming through. We appreciate you. And,
absolutely.
Thank you all for your love, kindness, and support. All things Last Stand Media, Constellation, all the shows we do. Patreon.com/Last Stand Media for early ad-free access, and laststandmedia.store for merch. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Till then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.